that has been given to our community. Did they have the PowerPoint? Was there a PowerPoint as well with this? I thought they had dropped it off. Okay, don't worry about it. I'm good with it. Well, we have this amazing gift, which Bernie Marcus has bestowed upon our community. It's a gift to Georgia. And it's basically a $300 million project, and he has put in over $250 million. And the rest of it we've been raising from other donors, corporate givers, things like that. And but it is a nonprofit 501c3. And part of our mission is to be an educational and scientific institution featuring exhibits and programs of the highest standard, offering engaging and exciting guest experiences and promoting the conservation of aquatic biodiversity throughout the world. And one of the strategic partners that was developed with this was a partnership with the University of Georgia Veterinary College. The veterinary school has an amazing reputation, but one of the areas that we could make stronger for it was this essentially $300 million lab that Bernie provided in the way of the aquarium. So by working with the vet school, it's actually a teaching hospital. We have over 10,000 square feet devoted toward veterinary services. It includes a surgery room. You can actually do surgery on fish. It includes 2 intensive care units, examination rooms, scrub rooms for veterinary surgeons, veterinary offices, water quality lab, pharmacy, medical records. And part of this is the behind-the-scenes tour. It also is featured by our students who come from all over Georgia in our education programs. It's especially designed with viewing windows so the students can see what our scientists, both from the aquarium and also from the University of Georgia, are doing. So what we asked for in this proposal is a grant to help develop this partnership and make this incredible gift available. A lot of science is being done here, groundbreaking science. The aquarium, of course, is the only aquarium in the United States, really the only aquarium outside of Asia, that has something like whale sharks. And so a lot of the core work that we do with the University of Georgia is a study of pathology. And the University of Georgia has provided a faculty pathologist to work with us, and then they rotate in their veterinary interns. So it's about teaching at a university level, but it's also about teaching to our public, because this area is on the behind-the-scenes tours, and it's also part of our K through 12 program as the students go behind the scenes in this area. Our students have come from all over Georgia. We've had well over 55,000 students in the first year, and we provide a sponsored admissions program for a lot of the students that are on specially funded programs. So, and they come from, we've had students come from Valdosta, we've had them come from obviously St. Mary's area, just all over the state. It's not just here in the metro area. And a lot of wonderful companies have helped us make sure that this gift was available to them as they provide for sponsored admissions. This program's also been featured a lot on CNN, CBS Evening News. One of the areas that everybody asks, how can you do surgery on a fish? Well, you can. You can basically put a water bag over the gills of the fish, and you can actually anesthetize the fish and then conduct surgery on it. Some of these techniques have never been done before, and thanks again to our partnership with the veterinary school. And I believe we have Randy here. Randy Powers is here from the University of Georgia, who will be glad to answer any questions from their behalf from the university side of it. We have a strong commitment to conservation and education. We are involved worldwide in research on whale sharks. I already talked about our pathology program. We're involved in coral bleaching, and we're also involved in aquaculture. Some of the things that we learn here from the aquarium research will benefit not only fish in our care, but also the aquaculture industry. We've worked with labs all over the state of Georgia, from Warm Springs to Cordele and along the coast as well, as we endeavor to understand the science behind caring for fish. Aquarium's had an amazing, just the last few comments, I'll let you ask me questions. You know, our opening year, we're about 430 days of operation. We've had over 4 million people. The first 12 months, we had 3.6 million people. About 45% of these guests are from out of the state. So it's really helped with tourism and filling the hotels and bringing people to Georgia as a destination. I thank you for the chance to share a little bit of our story. It's an amazing gift if you drive downtown area over by Centennial Olympic Park. The real benefit is when you look around, you see these huge cranes all over because of all the other development, the second wave of what has come after the aquarium. So I appreciate your consideration of this potential partnership, and I'd like to open it up to questions for you. Sir.
Well, thank you for coming and giving that presentation. You have an outstanding facility there. I've been in it. I've had the pleasure of being in it a few times and just amazed by it. I'm fascinated about what you mentioned about surgery on fishes and aquaculture. I guess my question is, and I really don't have enough knowledge to even know how to ask this question, but some of the work that you described you're doing there, some of the research that you and the University of Georgia are working on, will any of that research in any way complement, I guess, what I'm going to call seafood farms, if you will? And how would that work?
When I use the term aquaculture, it includes things like seafood and things like that. It absolutely does, because, and we gain a lot from them too. We've worked with aquaculture labs really all over the southeast, including Florida as well, and here in Georgia. It's not that strong of an industry here, but we have reached out to them, because when you have animals that you're managing all the water around them, it's the same as if it were an aquarium. So making sure that we know how to control diseases is very important to our health too, because we don't want to be eating fish that can create harm to us. But it's also, I mean, just think of how many people have a pet in their home and it's a fish. Well, all of that comes from the aquaculture industry too.
Well, you know, my last question. Over the last several years, I've heard reports in global news how the fish for food population is dwindling, how the oceans are being fished out, if you will. So it sounds like some of the research you're doing may lend itself toward replenishing that supply or complement that supply of fish that can be used for human consumption. Is that?
Well, it certainly is our mission and our intention, and we work with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Fisheries, our Department of Natural Resources here, and their fisheries program. This is all very important because so much of our planet depends on the ocean for their food, certainly in the case for protein. Some of the bigger species of fish, particularly the sharks, which are in desperate need of PR, millions of them are killed every year for shark finning. Well, they don't eat the rest of the fish. And one of the things that we're very interested in is promoting sustainable fisheries. And we don't have a problem eating fish. I don't eat fish here, but we are all about sustainable seafood. And this is something we promote as an education program as well as part of our research.
One last quick question. Any of this research that you're doing being used for medicinal purposes coming from fish?
To be honest with you, it's not our core direct initiative to do that, but it does have a secondary benefit, and largely that happens more through the university. You all heard about our wonderful white whale Gasper that we recently just lost. Peace existed for a year and a half with us, and what they did is they took University of Georgia developed something called Tricide. It is basically an antibacterial that can go on his skin, but the animal's in water, so it's got to stay in. And they developed something that can enable that to stay on an animal like that in the water, and it was improving his skin lesions. He had other problems, bone diseases and things like that eventually caused his demise, but the skin lesions was a major success. So sometimes when science makes an effort, there are ways to have it be applicable, but I would have to say that the good portion of that will happen because of our friends at the University of Georgia and their scientists.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
I've got a comment. You've invited the members here February the 8th at 3:30 in the afternoon to take a real tour of the aquarium where you'd look at the inside, see how the water. Could you quickly describe what they'll see so they'll get excitement together?
It's an amazing thing for the behind-the-scenes tour. We have guests every day. Our signing up for this behind-the-scenes tour because it's so fascinating, not just from the veterinary services area that I will show you in great detail, and you can see the microscopes. Like, we were the first people a couple weeks ago to look at whale shark blood. Now, no one had really looked at, we've seen shark blood before. When we looked at this whale shark blood, we discovered these things have huge blood cells, and big surprise, it's a big animal, but it was really fascinating for us to see, and we'll have some of that set up as demonstrations for you. But I think the other aspect of it, and I kind of take it for granted because I'm there so much, but the engineering behind the aquarium, it is unbelievable. I mean, there are enough pipes and things that go around 285. In terms of our plant and filtration, we have over 8 million gallons of water. We turn that water every 89 minutes. And it's an amazing engineering feat when you see it behind the scenes. Our commissary, where we prepare the food for the animals, we have an animal nutritionist on staff. And he makes sure that all the animals have their vitamins and nutrients. And we worry about things like that for sharks, too. So we put little vitamins in the fish that we feed them before they just take the fish. So we'll show you the commissary. We'll prepare the food. It's all over 550,000 pounds of fish, essentially, that go through our commissary, top quality grade that we have in terms of that operation. It's an amazingly complex operation. I mean, it's just like any business. Better yet, here's the analogy. It's like looking at a small city. Every job cluster you have in the city, we have there. We have over 240 full-time staff, 200 part-time staff. And when we take you around those areas, you're thinking, oh, I thought this was just about feeding fish and caring for fish. And then you learn about the immense food operation we have for our guests, because we have 3.6 million people, and our security systems and plant engineering and life support and the business aspects of this. It's just an amazing, comprehensive operation.
I've got another question. You're talking about fish and feeding fish and the like. What does this have to do with human life? We're focusing on human life in Georgia. What does what you're doing have to do with human life?
Well, I think at the core, the essence of the aquarium is how we connect to people. And every day we work at ways of how we connect. Number one way, and for us, is in terms of education. All of our education programs, and we've devoted 25% of this building just to education. There are 5 aquatic labs and an education loop that are all tied to the state curriculum for education. And we did this because a lot of the teachers listened to us and said, or that we listened to them, they said, we want to have a quality field experience where the students come to your program and it's actually tied to the lesson we're teaching in the classroom. So we worked very hard at doing that. It's really a credit to the Education Advisory Committee that helped us develop this. Education is one of our primary areas for it. Ultimately, we're teaching people about how to sustainable seafood, which I talked about earlier. There's nothing wrong with eating fish. We just want you to do it sustainably, and we want to protect the health of our oceans so that we have confidence that when we eat fish, we're not eating something that's laden with mercury or many other contaminants that are in the ocean. So, here Bernie Marcus has brought the world of oceans here to Atlanta. But we do have a piece that is really focused on Georgia. One of our exhibits is primarily dedicated to the Georgia coast, which is a critical habitat for us because it's a nursery for many of the fish that we like to eat.
We appreciate what the aquarium has done for our vet school in Athens and partnering with them, and it gives them additional research and development that they can carry on experiments and have quite a bit of learning experience in there, and we appreciate y'all working with them and look forward to being a partner with you.
Well, they were our first, Dr. Branson Ritchie from the veterinary school was our first veterinarian who helped us out. Our first fish came in October of 2003, and this was a sawfish, by the way. And the sawfish, I could actually hold its bill here and its tail here. That animal now is, I couldn't go like this and be able to hold it. It's grown that much. But he was real critical, as was the rest of his team, to come by and make sure we have healthy animals and care for them. We have a 25,000 square foot warehouse that serves as a quarantine. And so all the animals, when they come in, have to go through 45 days of quarantine. And during that time period, this is an excellent opportunity for the veterinary students and their faculty to examine the animals, make sure they're free of any parasites or any kind of diseases before we put them in with the animals that you see on exhibit. And so I can't say enough about what the veterinary school has done for us, and specifically early on, because 3 years prior to the aquarium opening, we were running this 25,000 square foot warehouse with wall-to-wall fish.
Well, thank you for being here, and we look forward to a February 8th visit with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate what you all are doing.
Thank you. I wanted to announce two of our new members. Yesterday we were in a hurry, but Representative Sheila Jones, we're glad you're with us. Stayed with us the whole time yesterday. Thank you very much. And Representative Chokas. And I think that's it. But I want to bring forward now Philip Jennings. If you'd come before, so this is your time. Give us about 5 minutes of your good story. I want to introduce Philip Jennings. This is someone that is a Georgia boy that has done well in the turf graft business. And let me tell you, if those of you who play golf appreciate a good turf, both putting surface and along the fairway. And Philip Jennings is the owner of Philip Jennings and Associate Turf Grass Company. But more importantly, for the state of Georgia, this is incredible that for the third year in a row, I hope I'm right on this, he has sold or prepared the turf grass for the Super Bowl. Now, this is a credit in and of itself for the state of Georgia, and we're proud that you're here, and you've got a proposal to the budgetary process yourself. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Bob. It is a pleasure to be here. I started down in Truitland County, Soperton, Georgia, home of Hugh Gillis. Back in 1998, started with 6 employees and about 150 acres of grass. Now we have over 200 employees, largest employer in Truitland County, and over 3,500 acres of grass scattered throughout Washington, Truitland, Toombs, and Emmanuel counties. And in 2001, we started another company called Jennings Logistics, and that was primarily the movement of frozen foods throughout the state of Georgia and into the port system in Savannah. We pick up mostly frozen poultry in Gainesville and Pendergrass, that area, and move it to Savannah. And one day we were having a meeting in our boardroom, and we said, wait a minute, if we can export frozen products, we had never talked about it before, the way we're exporting these frozen products, why can't we do grass around the world? And it was about the same time that the University of Georgia released a grass called Seashore Paspalum, a grass that you can water with ocean water. And we had this grass in our greenhouse. We were developing it. We were ready to go to the field with it. And one day a guy named Pete Dye called, and I was sitting in my office, and they said, Pete Dye is on the phone. And I said, yeah, right. And it was Pete Dye. And he said, I want to use this grass at the ocean course in Kiowa for the World Cup. We put the grass there, and immediately it was a stunning success for the World Cup. We went to Naples, Florida, put it in the Collier Club down there. Some of you may have played there. It's a pretty high-end course at Naples, but a great course down there. And all of a sudden we're saying, well, why aren't we doing this around the world? Leading architects were coming to us, Nicholas Fazio, Norman, everybody coming to us, the Dye Group, saying, we want to use this grass in Dubai. We want to use it in Saudi Arabia. We want to use it in Dominic. We've got all these courses around the world, and our greatest restrictor in development around the world is water. Number one problem all over the world, particularly with golf courses, where you're using 2 million, 3 million gallons of water a day, and you're having to desal the water. It was a problem. So we immediately began to do this, and in 2002 did our first course down in Exuma, Bahamas for Greg Norman. That's a Four Seasons resort way down there. We went down there when there was only the Peace and Plenty. That was the only hotel down there. Went down and put in an old hotel that looked like it was constructed in the 50s. We put that in and put the golf course in. Now they have a Four Seasons resort. The thing that has happened is as we go to these resorts, and as we go out of the country, we did 26 golf courses internationally last year. As we go to these courses internationally now, we are taking other Georgia companies with us. We got to get that grass there somehow, number one. We fly a lot of grass out of Atlanta, Georgia through Delta Airlines and other airlines. It's kind of hard to think about, but when people in Dubai want a golf course, when you have more money than God, you can do what you want to do. And when the people in Dubai want a golf course, they just rent the whole plane. the whole cargo plane. They load it with grass and they fly it over. Doesn't matter that it's $300,000 a trip and it takes 10 trips to get the grass over there to grass their golf course. So we have been able to move grass all over the world. We developed the technology at Jennings to be able to wash and purify grass. We dig the grass, we put it in these big machines, we wash it, we go through the Department of Agriculture, we get the phytosanitary certificates, we analyze the grass, we get the imports from the other countries, whether it's Mexico, China. We're doing a lot of work in China. Wherever we're going, we box this grass, we hydrocool it, we load it either on an ocean-going vessel going out of one of our ports. It is hydrocooled, chilled to 32 degrees. It will last up to 45 days on the water. Now, we're vacuum sealing it, and it's almost like a pack of vegetables. When you go to the grocery store, buy a pack of vegetables, we're hydrocooling that grass. So when we get there to the other end and we're ready to start grassing the golf course, I'm talking little giblets of grass. We start putting those little giblets of grass out on the fairways, and within 3-4 months, we've got a fairway that has grown in. Now, the University of Georgia develops these grasses. Dr. Ronnie Duncan and other researchers that have been at the university develop these grasses, and then they are turned over to UGARF, University of Georgia Research Foundation. Once they are turned over to UGARF, UGARF has the ability to do whatever they want to do with the grasses. And the problem has been is since the 90s, the late 90s, they have been licensing people outside the United States to grow these grass. They have like 16 or 18 people around the world that's growing this grass in Saudi Arabia, Dubai, Mexico, all places all over the world. People are growing these grasses. And what has happened is we have got the best one yet that we've ever had. We have developed the technology from the United States to be able to put this grass all over the world, to carry a lot of Georgia companies with us wherever we're going. And now they want to say, okay, we're fixing to license 16 countries outside the United States to give you to do this grass, and we're going to give you some competition. Well, that's fine if we couldn't do it from the United States. But we're talking millions of dollars worth of grass leaving our Georgia economy and going to Mexico or to China. Do you know how much stuff goes back to China? Very little. You can get all the boxes going to China that you want very, very cheap because they're all coming this way. And most of the time they're having to carry the containers and the boxes back to China empty because there's virtually nothing going from the United States back to China. Well, we have real problems with the UGARF wanting to license and take away the millions of dollars that Georgia companies have got into over the last 3 or 4 years by licensing these people outside the United States to grow grass. We have to import enough things into this country, and when we develop something that is really good in the United States, there should be a little bit of protection, particularly from our land-grant university, to protect the citizens of Georgia and the people of Georgia. If you look at the money that flows back in, of the $14 million worth of grass that we intend to export over the next 3 years, that money will flow back in because a lot of that money is freight money. It's money that we carry with us because we recently had a seminar down in the Dominican Republic, and the people that were working down there on the courses at Punta Cana and the courses down there, we carried the John Deere people with us from Augusta. We carried the Bass Irrigation people with us from Waynesboro, Georgia. All these people are doing work down there and shipping their product down there as a result of what we're doing. The inland box people from Rome, Georgia. The people in Rennes that make the bunker liners. We are carrying a lot of people with us, and we think that we have a phenomenal story of the last 4 years. If you look at one of the reports, it shows that Georgia's been positive on exports some $71 million based on a 4-year average. We contribute to that, and we want to keep contributing to it.
Any questions? I know Chairman Lewis has some.
I got a question. Have you developed a grass yet that you don't have to mow any more than once or twice a week?
We can put some spray on it to stop it, but No, not yet.
That's a great story. Appreciate you sharing that.
Representative Neal.
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand. Was the grass, this strain of grass is what I'm going to call it, or whatever, that's probably a bad term, but was it developed at the University of Georgia, or was it developed in your private company?
It was developed at the University of Georgia by Dr. Ronnie Duncan.
And now they then transfer, I guess, the license to that into another organization. Is it a UGAF? Is that what you call it?
UGAR.
UGAR.
Yes, sir. The University of Georgia Research Foundation, the intellectual property owner.
Right. And instead of incubating Georgia business with those developments, they're giving the technology away to foreign countries. Am I hearing you right?
You are hearing me absolutely correct.
So we paid for them to throw away our money and give it to foreign countries.
Exactly.
In effect.
We have met, there are 4 people that make that decision. One of them is Commissioner of Agriculture. He was unaware of how this was set up. We think we have finally enlightened him. We had difficulty with that, but we think we have crossed that. We have met with the Dean of the College of Agriculture, and we have met with some of the UGARF officials. We certainly don't know where we stand yet. Last year, they issued 16 licenses without us knowing it. And when we found out about it, we created a lot of pressure and was able to persuade them to wait 1 year before they did it again, and that time is coming up immediately for them to begin their reissue of license.
May I follow up, Mr. Chairman? How would you apply for a license? I mean, obviously your company could demonstrate the expertise to nurture the proprietary grass or whatever it is, the new formula. You could do all that stuff. What do you buy the license, or
yes,
do you
sir.
apply? How do they price it?
We bought the license from the university to have a domestic license and a U.S. license. Now they are going out. We paid $25,000 for our license. Plus we pay royalties. Now our royalties back to the University of Georgia this first year alone was $120,000. Next year, our royalties, and I have all that in charts and formulas, our royalties back to the university of next year would be something like $240,000. So we bought the initial license, and then we pay royalties back.
The royalties predicated on your sales of
yes,
the
sir.
product?
Just our company alone.
So there's a royalty contract, in other words, with it's in the license agreement.
Yes, sir. That is correct. They have not been able to demonstrate to us. We have made this grass move so fast because we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars advertising it in Beijing. We've been in trade shows in Beijing, in the Dominican Republic, in Tokyo, in Greece. We have somebody in Cairo today. We have people that don't do anything but travel promoting this grass. The people that we can show you that the 16 architects that have spec'd this grass, 14 of the architects are from Georgia and Florida.
I'm convinced it's good grass, but do you have the license for the grass?
Yes, sir.
You solely have the license?
No, sir. I do not solely have the license. There are other producers in Georgia that have the same license that I do.
But how about in foreign countries?
Not yet. That's what they're trying to do now. They are currently getting ready to issue these licenses to as many as 16 different foreign countries.
And please tell me one more time, how do you know that for sure?
Well, I have a letter documenting it. Would you like to see that letter?
Could we see that, please?
This is a letter that was issued from the Georgia Seed Development Commission on April the 20th, and it's addressed that they were going to license international producers. And that's when we stopped it the first time. So they're ready to proceed for the second time now.
How is this seed commission related to University?
What was the question again, sir?
Last question. How is this seed commission related to the University of Georgia?
We understand that there are 4 people that have influence with UGARF. One of them being, that is the Georgia Commissioner of Agriculture's, one of his divisions under him. That Dr. Garland is directly underneath the Commissioner of Agriculture. There is also a Canadian company that administers all this for the University of Georgia, UGARF. And that Canadian company, we could talk for hours about this because it's very tangled and we don't understand it all either. But there is a Canadian company that takes half of these royalties for administering that for UGARF.
We've got to move on. Representative Lewis, a quick question, and then Representative.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on Chairman O'Neill's questioning there, if I may, and make sure I understood right. The University of Georgia owns the patent rights to this development grass. I'm supposing that's a good way of putting it, and that's fine.
I assume it's the University of Georgia. It is either UGARF, which is the University of Georgia Research Foundation, or the university, one of them.
All right. And if they do license this to foreign countries, they would rightfully receive royalties or some sort of compensation if they go through with that, just like they received from you.
That is correct.
That's pretty amazing, because I guess this may be a legal stretch in my logic, and I may be showing my ignorance here, but the University of Georgia is owned by the state of Georgia. I think that patent and probably the proceeds that come in may belong to the people of the state of Georgia. And I agree with Chairman O'Neill. That's amazing that we may be licensing foreign countries to develop what might be the next great thing in grass agriculture. Thank you for your presentation.
Okay.
Excuse me. I've got two questions so I can get this correct. The licensing fee is $25,000 per year?
That's right. And in this letter that I just handed Chairman, they weren't going to charge the international people but $5,000.
Okay. And then the royalty fees, how much are those?
They're based on a square foot basis, and so much per square foot, like a half a cent for every square foot. And then I'm not familiar with the numbers right this second because I don't figure the royalties, but it's several cents per bushel. Now, they document everything that goes out because they monitor our fields. They're looked at from the satellite. They know what we're doing. That's another problem we have. How do you monitor somebody in Saudi Arabia? Or how do you monitor somebody in Mexico? How do you know they're not stealing the grass? I mean, there are lots of problems that we don't have time to get into, and it's a big concern.
Okay, and your license is, as I said, on an annual basis, but you do not have the exclusive.
That is correct.
Okay, what about the licensees in the foreign countries? Are those exclusives for their countries, or are they just a license for someone that wants to sell?
Just a license. For example, in Argentina, these guys have a license. There is not a single golf course in that whole country in these kinds of grasses. They simply compete with us in the Pacific Rim. They don't do anything but buy it and export the grass.
Okay. One last question. Did you not ask for an international license when you got the license to sell your product here, or did they have an international license developed at that time?
I have an international license to sell.
Gotcha.
But I don't have an exclusive.
Gotcha.
And they can go back and license anybody they want to at any time they want to.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We're going to have to move on, but congratulations once again for, did you say 3 years in a row for the Super Bowl? So when you watch the Super Bowl this year, think of Philip Jennings Company, a Georgia-based company. So thank you for being here. We're going to have to ask those that come forward. We've gotten way out of line here on time, but if you could hold your comments about 5 to 6 minutes or 7 minutes, and then save us time for a few questions. The next one is Georgia Council for Public Libraries. Okay. If you could hold your comments about 4 or 5 minutes, and then let's have time for a few questions if we have them.
I can do it. Representative Smith and members of the committee, I'm Joe Forsey. I am the director of the Northwest Georgia Regional Library. I'm based in Dalton, Georgia. I'm also the president of a group called the Georgia Council of Public Libraries, and we sure do appreciate your giving us some time to come and talk to you this morning about public library needs.
and it's great to have that invitation. I will keep my comments brief. I'm going to speak primarily to 2 points regarding funding for the year. One, before I begin with that, I'd like to say that I do have Kathy Ames, my colleague here from the Athens Regional Library, so she can answer any specific questions in that regard. Libraries are being used more than ever, and this is both from the traditional books kind of service all the way to the more currently popular computer services. They're all going up. Particularly this year, we are pushing for something which we refer to as a buck for books. Many years ago, we had about 60 cents per capita coming from the state for materials grants to public libraries. Over about a 3 or 4 year period, that did drop a good bit, down to 35 cents per capita. We thank you for the extra $2 million that came for books last year. That kind of put us back to about where we had been. We would ask your support for the $2 million for books that has been put in Governor Perdue's budget recommendation for this year. That would continue that money and again keep us kind of where we were for several years. It's not making a lot of progress, but at least we're not going backward on that. So we definitely do ask your help on that. One which we haven't talked about as much is the Public Library Capital Outlay Program, or what we refer to as construction grants. This is one of the only states in the nation, if not the only one, that makes you do all of your local matching up front. Before you even come to the state and go through their process of asking for a public library construction grant, a local system, local governments, local library boards have to literally plan every square foot of that new building. They have to tell you what those areas are going to have in them, everything from the services to what equipment's going to be there, what chairs and tables, whether it has computer tie-ins. It's an enormous amount of planning up front, but that pays off. They also have to provide their local dollars up front. That's the only one I know of in the country. So by the time they come and ask for their state money, they're ready to go. And the program was designed this way over 30 years ago to be sure that we didn't come and get state money for a building and then not have enough local to finish it. It's just that business of counting the cost, as we're told to do. This year, we do not have a recommendation in the governor's budget for the state matching money for any of the 8 programs that had gone through that process, had been recommended through the Georgia Public Library Service and the Board of Regents. When we don't get the money for a construction project after we've gone through all the planning and after we've put up our local money, it feels to a local government and a local library board like we've really abandoned our 30-plus years understanding and commitment, our partnership on how we build a local public library, sharing that cost between state and local governments. I do ask you to try to find a way to put that money back in the budget. If you can't put it all, I would ask that you try to put all that you can in it, because there is a process to assign a priority if there's not enough money in the appropriation. But again, this is not something that just popped up this year. These communities have been planning it for many years, and their money is waiting for their state match, which is a program and a formula that's been developed over years. With that, I'm going to stop, and if I can answer any questions, I'd be delighted to do so.
I just had one quick question. We're relating to where the libraries are in funding. Currently, you're under the Regents' budget. Is that
Board of
correct?
Regents, yes, sir.
In the past, you've been under the Department of Education and then
And Department of Technical and Adult Education.
What do you see as the best way to get your message across without every library board coming to see us for particular funding requests? I mean, what's the best possible way for library to be lobbied in the legislature?
Well, we would always like to have these things dealt with up front and feel that we could get. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm prone to go to the person instead of the microphone. Thank you. We would like to be able to work this out in advance so that we don't have individual boards coming to see everybody in the legislature. We did, of course, start working on this back in the late summer and fall. So we've gone to all of the groups that were involved in making up the original budget request. We, of course, can continue to do that, but if you're asking me about where we stand in state government.
Well, there was a study committee this past year,
yes, sir.
And one of the issues that wasn't addressed perhaps is where the libraries need to be in the funding pecking order somewhere. Let's keep it brief.
I think I'm with you now. Okay, well, very briefly, I will tell you that I feel like the Board of Regents is the best location we've had in Georgia since the 40s. Prior to 1943, Georgia had a separate state library commission, and there are some advantages to that. Most of the state libraries in the nation are, in fact, independent agencies. Others are located in various places in state government. We did have discussion, I know, when public libraries were moved to the Board of Regents about having a separate or attached board or agency that reported for reporting purposes through the Board of Regents or another state agency. I think that's fine. I really believe the key is having a way to make sure that the public library issue and the public library funding gets considered and does not disappear from sight. It's too easy when you're seeing millions of dollars in a budget and library is never mentioned to not really know whether you funded it or you didn't. How could we expect as much paper as you process for you to be able to handle that? So I think the visibility is the key. I'd be glad to work, and I know Representative Smith, you asked me about some specific states. I'll have that answer for you by tomorrow. I do have some research going on to be sure my data is up to date. But I've worked in 3 state libraries in the South. All of those were, prior to my coming to Georgia, either independent agencies or independent state boards or commissions that were set up. You're not maybe big. In fact, they're never big. They're little agencies. But it gives them the chance to have an identifiable budget. And I think that the identity is the problem that we run into. I rarely find anybody against libraries. It's just hard to get to them with everything else on your plate.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you being here with us. Dr. Robert Arnold with Griffin Tech. And I must tell you that you've got some great advocates here in the legislature, and Representative Yates and Representative Knight. They will live with you 24/7 to get their funding requests.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for those kind comments, and we certainly do appreciate our representatives down in Spalding County. And thank you and the other committee members for taking time out of your busy day to listen to our needs. And I have a PowerPoint presentation copy. If you would like to have that, it might help a little bit to go along. If you'd like to share that, like for them to share that with you. Would that, Bill?
Yes, sir. We're trying to hold it to 5 minutes or 6 minutes, okay, and then some questions.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Our primary need is a medical technology building. Our medical programs are just exploding. Matter of fact, all of our medical programs are housed in makeshift classrooms. Some of our other colleagues, they have needs too, but we think at Griffin Tech that our needs are certainly greater than some of our other sister colleges. We have 23 mobile classrooms on campus, and we certainly like to replace those with a medical technology building. Enrollment rise, comparatively speaking, to square footage. You look over on page 24. I've made a comparison with some of our sister schools there on the square footage compared to enrollment. You can see that our enrollment is in the top tier of all the technical colleges. However, our square footage and lab space is in the lower tier. So those numbers there indicate the need for expansion at Griffin Technical College, especially for our medical programs. Currently, our medical programs account for about 35-36% of our total enrollment. We have about 537 students this quarter in waiting lists for the medical programs. The first pages there you'll see just give you a little flavor of the campus with some of the mobile classrooms on there. But also, I'm told that we're here for dual purpose or for equipment funding over at the Butts County Center. And did you give those out, Dr. Williams? You have another handout there that's a line item, itemizes our equipment needs for the Butts County Center over there. But we invite you to come down to our campus and see our needs firsthand. Mr. Chairman Smith, I know you've been down that way, and Representative Knight is there quite frequently. But our needs are great at Griffin, and we're great and growing. But we feel like that we do much more with less, and I think the numbers will bear that out. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
I have one question from 12. Oh, Representative Chokas.
Could you please tell me if Griffin Tech has an active foundation?
We do, sir, and it has been dormant for a while, but in the last couple of years we've revived that, and it is very active, and Ms. Barbara Jo Cook is here with me now. She sort of heads that up. We had a very successful campaign last year. We raised over $100,000 last year, and we hope to do better than that next year. Matter of fact, our foundation is looking now trying to acquire 2 acres of property adjacent to the main campus for us. So our foundation is very active, and we're moving forward.
Have any other questions? Representative Knight, do you have anything to say, or we'll just talk? Okay, thank you. We thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
See you. Columbus Tech, Dr. Bob Jones. Glad you're here. And we got Cousin Smith there with you, right?
Absolutely.
Because I see Cousin Smith and got 2 Cousins Smith.
Oh, hey, Richard. I didn't see him come in either.
Glad you're here.
Chairman Smith, members of the committee, we appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this morning. We want to discuss with you what is DTAE's #1 priority this year in capital outlay for new construction. And I'm going to, in consideration of your time, you've got a PowerPoint presentation that we're passing out there, but what I'm going to show you is actually something slightly different. And we want to talk a little bit, it was mentioned a moment ago about foundations, and one of the things that is occurring in this project is our foundation has been very active in the midst of a capital campaign. And what I brought to you today, if you'll actually look more at the screen than that document there, because that is slightly different. This is a public and private sector on parallel paths to fulfill common goals. And you can see the things here that we're trying to accomplish, primarily sustainable health care workforce, but the creation of good paying jobs, because this really is an area where it's not only the most jobs being created in the state, but the best jobs, quite frankly. And so we think it's a great opportunity. And healthcare professionals, our #1 priority, and it's been our commitment to our community. We started several years ago looking at what is the best use of our resources, the most efficient use of our resources in our community. That was to train healthcare professionals. I've got a list here of the top 10 job openings at the associate degree level in Georgia, and you can see registered nurses and those things that Columbus Tech offers there are right at the top of the list, and a lot of those, most of those, as a matter of fact, are in the healthcare area. You can see something very similar to that at the diploma level as well. One of the things that I pulled out of our DTA budget presentation that I think it's interesting to pay attention to is healthcare and elder care. When we get training in our strategic industry group, from the time our students enter until the time they graduate, the largest difference in income comes in the healthcare and elder care area. You can see an increase of about $9,000 annually, a person that's graduated from a healthcare program, as opposed to the others there on that chart. So there's a great difference there. That and in the life sciences. The average hourly wages, you can see there in our MSA in Columbus for our programs that we offer. What have we done? We've listed our community, and you can see the laundry list there of new programs we put in, working with our healthcare community. We have new programs in the pipeline. We're still working on some feasibility studies for those. We have over 1,500 students. This is something I want to emphasize. We've got 1,500 students that are in the allied health area at Columbus that want to be in a specific program, either nursing, surge tech, something of this nature. We've got 1,500 students in an allied health certificate program that are sort of in a holding pattern. They're working on the general studies and all. Will all of these be able to go into a program? No, they won't, because they're going to lack some basic skills. But we have 1,500 students that want to be in a specific healthcare program. The students know where the jobs are. They understand this clearly. And so this is an important number. We've got to find programs. We've got to have programs to put these students out into. And so we are in the process of developing those, but facilities are the holdup right now on that. Our greatest challenge, lack of adequate facilities. In 2006, you can see we were only able to take 43% of the qualified students. Now, these were students that had already been screened and fully qualified to go into those programs. We had to turn away 57% of those students. Same thing in other healthcare programs. That was in nursing, the other healthcare programs. We have property that we have invested state dollars in. We've got almost $4 million. The property up on the backside of the railroad, which is the old mill. You can see we've now cleared that. And this is our master plan to build out that property. But here's what I wanted to point out to you. Our local hospitals and healthcare providers have contributed over $1.5 million in support of our healthcare programs in Columbus and our health science programs. They've really been active in that regard. And our Technical College Foundation has now raised over $5 million toward a $14 million goal in support of health science education and training. Last week, we had an announcement. Dan and Kathleen Amos from AFLAC donated $1 million to this campaign. We've now had 3 gifts in excess of $1 million, which is very rare for colleges of our size. And so we do have good community support, and the private sector stepping up and really coming to the table with this to support what we're doing here. So this is truly a partnership between the state of Georgia and our private funds through our foundation. So we're very supportive of that, and what we're asking you is to fund the number one project on the DTA list this year, a 70,000 square foot health sciences facility. It's recommended in the governor's budget at $16.285 million. And I'll entertain any questions from there.
I have one question. I don't see any others. It seems like everybody that comes in here has a request, which is good, and it seems like the top priority is health delivery of allied health. Mm-hmm. And I notice your foundation is very, very active. $4 million out of $15 million or $14 million or whatever it is.
We've got 5 at this moment, right?
And this is a problem that we've faced with for years. Board of Regents have over a $3 billion request over the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. And we've got to continue to put this thinking cap on. How do we raise that $14 million that you need to do your work there? Is there something in the tax code? Is there something somewhere, somehow, that we can reach out and find those dollars for this crucial number? When you turn around 1,500 people, something's wrong with the picture.
I agree with you, and I think that what you've got is a situation where this is a story that has to be told, because you, I, and everyone on this committee is going to age. Healthcare, the shortage of healthcare workers is going to be a critical issue for this country. And while we have our programs at Columbus Tech, as an example, our 2-year programs will transfer into the university systems programs in nursing and areas like that. Our ADN will transfer into their BSN. The 2-year programs are the quickest way to get healthcare workers into the workforce. And so it's our healthcare program is just a marvelous story. I think what it needs is just to be told. But I think if you just put it in sheer numbers, people begin to understand it. I know that the AFLAC people, particularly when we told the story to them, they fully understood what we're talking about. Their business is related to that in some way as well. But we've got other foundations and other groups that clearly understand it. And the best way I've been able to put it is, and we put it in our case for support, who's going to take care of our families? As we get older, and you need to go to the hospital, as I had my mother-in-law at the emergency room yesterday morning, she's in her mid-80s for a problem, who's going to be there to take care of them? You're going to have extended waits, so you've got to be able to get in the hospital beds. There are places now where you'll go to an emergency room and you can't get a bed in the hospital, not because they don't have a bed, they don't have nurses to cover the floors. So there are real issues in health care, and we've got to address this. This is going to be a huge issue for our country. And it's not just in Georgia, it's everywhere.
One more question.
Yes, sir.
Chairman Lewis.
Right here. Thank you for that presentation. Just real quickly, I appreciate and understand the need for health care. I know we have a shortage of nurses and all that, and the technical school, and in my district, near my district, they're working toward the same goals.
Yes, sir.
I want to kind of shift my question toward the manufacturing sector. And I understand the Quick Start and how most technical schools implement that. I guess apart from Quick Start, what can you elaborate a little bit on what you see students doing in choosing a field related to manufacturing? Because that's an important component of our economy as well.
Sure.
Is everything. If you would just
Let
elaborate.
me just make a general comment. When we looked at this, we realized there were three areas that you have to take care of. Manufacturing has to be taken care of in Georgia. We can't afford to lose our manufacturers because that's a lot of capital investments. It's labor intensive. There's a lot of work and a lot of money tied up in manufacturing. So you have to do that. So we have a service industry that's very strong, particularly in the Columbus area, where we have a lot of financial processing services and things of this nature. So we have that. But manufacturing is a key. And then, of course, healthcare is where we tended to focus some of our efforts. Ms. Coleman, would you step up here just a moment, please? Ms. Nancy Coleman is our Executive Vice President of Economic Development. I'd like to just have her give you 1 minute to tell you about what we do in manufacturing. I think she can tell you actually better than I can about what we're doing with the manufacturing sector.
We are very lucky in Columbus to have a diverse industry structure, but to just give you an idea of the impact that we feel we've made in the business industry community, out of all the 34 technical colleges in Georgia, we serve the largest number of business and industries quarterly through our economic development piece, and that's about 100 companies a quarter. And I totally agree with Bob Jones. You must sustain your manufacturing sector. That's where your largest capital investment is. With the Kia announcement, it took us about 2 months to go ahead and put in an advanced manufacturing program to respond to the needs of Kia and actually be able to train workers, upgrade workers that were leaving and being displaced from the textile industry, get them into the technical college, get their skills upgraded, and get them a job that will pay them $18 to $20 an hour. Thank you.
Real quick, and I appreciate that answer. Do you find, can you put a count on the number of students that once they enter a technical school, they are intentionally entering that school for a certain manufacturing job sector? Has that been identified, much like you can medical related?
It just depends on the community, I think. We have, certainly in Columbus, we have an active aviation industry with Cessna there, with Macaulay Propellers, as well as Pratt & Whitney. And to show you the focus we put on it at Columbus Tech, I hired Nancy from Pratt & Whitney, so she came from Pratt & Whitney. So we clearly understand that we've been the driving force behind our manufacturing council in Columbus. Columbus Technical College reorganized that after it was dropped for a number of years. We've got great relationships with all of our manufacturers in Columbus. We're Kodak Polychrome, like say Cessna, Pratt. You can just knock them over. If you got an East Industrial Park in Columbus, just knock them over like dominoes. The work we do with those manufacturers have done with them. DNA, Denim North America, one of the few denim manufacturers still in existence in the United States, is one of our big clients. We work closely with them. Of course, we've had numbers of projects with Synovus and Aflac and those companies as well. Thank you. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Can y'all tell he's excited about what he does at Columbus?
We are excited. Thank you so much for all the effort.
Thank you for being here.
I want to thank you for the opportunity. Last year, you gave us an opportunity. We were number 3 on the list and were not recommended to come before your committee and present. We appreciated that, and we certainly appreciate this year when we are recommended and did make it to the top of the list. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Next is Linda Daniels. Is she here? Linda Daniels is an architect and assistant chancellor. Is that what it is?
Vice Chancellor.
Vice Chancellor of the Board of Regents in Georgia. We're glad you're here to talk about MRR. Thank you for being here and for your time yesterday as well.
Glad to be here and answer any questions that I can. Be happy to do that. If you do not know, we are asking for $60 million in MRR funding this year. The cost of ownership is not cheap. You understand this as owners of your own homes and cars, and many of you have experienced this in your business if the business that you own requires facilities. So budgeting for the ongoing expense of owning buildings and property is not only important, it's critical. The Board of Regents addresses its stewardship of owning facilities through 3 avenues of funding: maintenance and operations funding, MRR, or major repair and renovation funding, and sometimes even through our major capital project funding. Today I want to answer any questions about MRR requests that you have, but let me provide some brief background material, if Tom could hand that out. I do have a handout for that. Our MRR request has historically been based on a calculation approximately 1% of the estimated replacement value of our current space. The industry standard is closer to 1.5 or 3% of replacement value. Funding is then distributed to our campuses based on the amount of space they have, and their pro rata share is qualified by both the age and quality of that existing space. In addition, we have our campuses submit a list of their ongoing priorities for review and vetting by the system staff, and this is to ensure that funding is being targeted to the highest stewardship priorities for the ownership of property. In this handout, we have a brief white paper on the front page that just talks about the MRR program and what it's all about. The second page includes a chart of the recent history of the types of projects that MRR funding is focused on. And finally, I have included, just to try to make this as real for you as possible, some examples of a campus request for MRR. It's their prioritized request for funding. These are just some samples from the 07 budget. And in addition, I have included some brief descriptions of those projects in just layman's terms so that we will give you an idea of the basic types of work that's being done with this money. It is not my intent to come up here and talk about structural defects and try to make this all architectural, engineering, or technically oriented. This is the reality of owning structures, the repairs of roofs, elevators, the things that make our buildings function and allow us to address our core mission. So with that, I'll be happy to answer questions today if you would like to study that material and follow up with written questions to the Board of Regents for more detail. Again, we want to answer your questions. This funding is critical to keep us in business.
Ms. Daniels, how far along are we in asbestos abatement? How much more do we have to do to completely clear that out of the system?
We have, I think, all of the issues that are immediate areas of concern. With asbestos abatement, and I don't want to get all technical about it, is a problem or it isn't a problem, but if it's not disturbed, if it's encapsulated, if it's within the structure of a building at a place that a person is not exposed to, it is not a hazard. It's only when you go in and try to renovate and maybe shake it up and stir it up and get it all over the place that it becomes a problem. All known instances of asbestos that's in a position where it could deteriorate or cause health problems have been addressed. But as you go on, as you renovate buildings, as you replace roofs, you will find asbestos in buildings. It's just the nature of the beast. That was the material of choice for many, many years, and it is there in your public buildings and your private buildings, and it's something you have to stay attuned to. But it's not something you necessarily want to go out and track it down with radar and try to disturb it unless you're
for the new members, Ms. Daniels is also a professional architect, and she worked very, very closely with our committee, and I appreciate what you do too, Ms. Daniels. Representative Lewis.
Thank you, Ms. Daniels. I noticed on your handout here, and I think I heard it the other day, where you're managing over 3,000 buildings in the university system. And by the way, I'll support what you're asking for. Don't get me wrong. My question may sound like I'm not, but I do. But you know, in the 21st century that we've just entered now, and with the advent of computers and online courses and all that high-tech stuff, has that in any way diminished the need for capital outlay and brick-and-mortar projects in any way?
I love to meet with anyone in information technology, distance learning, and distributed learning because it is not a battle of bricks against clicks. This is a very synergistic, interactive relationship, and trust me, it's job security for me because it will cost you more to house the technology and the people who operate a lot of that. The technology is here. It is integrated into our buildings. It's causing certain efficiencies, but then it generates other costs because you have staff associated with keeping all that infrastructure up and running, and they need offices and access or a car to get about if that's appropriate. But I think that the university system has done, is very interested in, has done a lot of outreach, not only in pure distance learning, but what they call the hybrid courses, because sometimes people want a certain amount of face time to kind of complement what they're getting with distributed learning. I think that the Board of Regents under the new Chancellor's leadership is really going to be at the cutting edge of matching, finding the right balance of technology with facilities.
Thank you.
Relating to technology, I remember when I was at Georgia back in, well, I'm going to say 1980 something, but it wouldn't, that would be true, but it was really 1971. And there was one facility there that was built specifically for a computer center. Mm-hmm. And it was a huge building. Now it's down to this size. Are these shrinking where you can open them up to classrooms?
The technology is changing, and keeping up with that is a challenge, how to offer the coursework and what the back-of-house infrastructure that's needed is. Today's students demand that level of technology. You've got kids in college. My kids are coming up in high school and college, and they've got to have it. They've got to have it to be savvy in their roles once they enter the business community. So they're demanding it. It's keeping the faculty up to speed and meeting their demand for this level of technology. And you will see these renovation projects are literally going back into some of the older buildings and putting in the fiber and the guts to support the technology. All of our new buildings are built more state-of-the-art. The Chancellor was talking about libraries yesterday and the fact that we're not building your grandfather's library. We're building very synergistic, active centers that accommodate the technology, and we kind of call it campus fabric, campus threads, because the threads that go out all over the world to give you access to information and technology is really what the education's about. There's still something to be said for a sense of place where you can acquire that.
I've got one other question about libraries. When we were growing up, it was books and more books. Now it's technology, it's the internet, it's Google, Yahoo, and the like. And I've often wondered, we're continuing to build bigger and larger libraries. Are these students actually using the books that are on the shelves, or are libraries being built with larger computer centers? Or
they're actually being built with larger interactive space, whether it's the meeting rooms or the centers where they can get to their laptops or get their laptops plugged in or get to equipment that they can access. What you're finding is the books are being warehoused. In many instances, the book may not actually even be in the library anymore. You can more cost effectively warehouse the books and get a retrieval system. So you've got technology in the library that you're building. I know the University of Georgia has looked at that, and there are some efficiencies to be had because you don't have to make the rows of the stacks ADA accessible for a wheelchair. You literally have a computer that goes and picks up that book and gets it delivered. So it's amazing the synergies that are being created. But we're not replicating yesterday and just adding the new stuff we want on. I think what we're looking for is what is today's education demanding and requiring.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Daniel.
Thank you.
Appreciate what you do to Georgia. Coosa Valley Technical College, Dr. Craig McDaniel. Appreciate you coming, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I want to tell you how much I appreciate the opportunity to be here to make this presentation, and to the committee for taking time. Our request is for a facility on our Gordon County satellite campus. Coosa Valley Technical College's main campus is in Rome. We have a satellite campus in Polk County, one in Gordon County, and we have been in operation in Gordon County since fall quarter of 1997. It's really unique what that community did back in the mid-90s. They decided that they wanted to have a technical school presence in their community. We are the only form of higher education in Gordon County. The community made a commitment to raise $1 million and as seed money for that facility, and then went down and met with Governor Zell Miller at the time and got a commitment from the governor that if they would in fact raise that money, that capital outlay appropriation would be made. And the facility was constructed. We have since added phase 2 to that facility, and now we're looking at adding phase 3. Our college is one of the older colleges on our Rome campus. We have addressed the healthcare issue. We have 29 different health programs on our Rome campus. We have made a strong commitment to manufacturing. We have had tremendous success in Floyd, Gordon, and Polk County in bringing manufacturing jobs in. At the same time, we have lost thousands of manufacturing jobs. We're actually going through that transformation of American industry. The programs that we will put on the Gordon County campus address to some extent the healthcare needs in Gordon County. Gordon County is unique in that it lies between several metropolitan statistical areas. We're adding medical assisting, medical laboratory technology, and phlebotomy, but we're focusing also on the transportation industry. Because of Shaw and Mohawk and the strong textile and carpet industry there, there's a tremendous need for commercial truck drivers, and there's a shortage not only for the people that drive the trucks, but the people that maintain the trucks. We're going to put in a commercial truck driving program, a diesel mechanic program, and a heavy equipment technician program. In addition to that, a banking and finance program, because we did a needs assessment and we found that there was a legitimate shortage of people to work in the financial institutions. Our college, where we sit up there, is, and I know you hear this over and over and over again, we are the economic engine. Gordon County has the highest dropout rate of any county in Georgia. It is a situation where we have one of our best offerings there is the adult literacy program. And we have a huge influx of people coming directly from the high schools into the adult literacy program. But also, as manufacturing churns and puts these people back out on the streets, so many of those people don't have the skills to go to work for a Pirelli tire or for a Faust manufacturing or some of these new companies. And before they can get those skills, they have to enter into another program, an occupational program. Before they can do that, they need to get their GED. Some of these people literally cannot read or write. So our college has been at the table every time a new industry has been brought into the community, or in the case of Atmore Brewing Corporation or Harbison Walker, or the many downsizings in the textile industry, we're at the table when we're trying to figure out what to do with those displaced workers. We think we are well balanced as a college in terms of our course offerings that focus on healthcare, manufacturing, public service. On this campus, we have criminal justice, fire science, and homeland security. We also do some of the computer classes, the business office technology, and the computer information systems. Building this facility will finish our initial capital outlay plan, and we do operate from a strategic plan. This Phase 3 facility was actually funded in the 2004 session of the General Assembly. The General Assembly funded the building. At the end of the session, the building was deferred, and at the beginning of the next session, the funds were given to DeKalb Tech, and we were moved from number 4 on the list down to number 13 on the list. At the present time, we're number 5 on DTAE's capital outlay list. We've done about 75% of the planning to get this building done. We actually have an architect on board. In terms of community support, beyond the community's investment of over $1 million back in the mid-'90s, we're in the middle of a campaign to raise $2.5 million. We currently are at about $1.8 million toward that goal. Included in that $1.8 million is a donation of land of about $137,000 that is adjacent to our campus that will actually be the commercial truck driving range for this new program. We've had another donation of land of about $190,000 that is a truck driving terminal that we're using in the meantime, so that we're going to go ahead and begin the commercial truck driving program until we can get this facility built and move it over to the campus. This project has huge community support from our chamber, our business leaders, the city and county commission over in Gordon County. It is the only funding priority of our local board of directors, and it has the complete support of anybody and everybody at Coosa Valley Technical College, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Representative Jokers.
Just one question. What is your current enrollment at your technical school?
We are at about, right now we're at about 2850. Between our credit and non-credit enrollment, traditionally we serve about 10,000 people a year. We have a strong economic development program. One point of pride that I want to announce is in the newspaper today. Our school got involved in customer service both internally and externally about 5 years ago. And I know that's one of the governor's initiatives. Our college has signed an agreement with the governor's office of customer service, Joe Doyle and his people, to actually develop that training program, and we will be providing the training that for all, I think, 600,000 state employees. And any facet of business, whether it's customer service, work ethics, retail, marketing, healthcare, manufacturing, anything that creates jobs in a community, we will always be at the table.
Any other questions? I had the pleasure of meeting with the president of Pirelli Tire of North America last week, and he was, of course, bragging on all of the technical colleges that have produced a workforce for his tire facility up there in Rome. So we applaud you for what you do in your area, but appreciate you coming. No other questions? Appreciate what you do.
Thank you very much. If I could mention one thing about Pirelli Tire, we did that Quick Start project along with Jackie Rohosky and her staff as a part of our foundation campaign. They have actually donated one of their robots and one of their manufacturing systems that will be implemented into our automated manufacturing technology lab on our Rome campus. Of the first 13 people that went to work for Pirelli, 11 of those people were Coosa Valley Tech graduates.
One other thing, I think February the 2nd, they're having a big economic development meeting in Rome, and once again, y'all will be applauded for what you do, Quick Start and the technical college. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you very much.
And have the mic on. Police Chief Jimmy Williamson, is he here? He might have not gotten the ball. I think he's here. Macon State College. Good morning. How you doing, sir?
Mr. Chairman.
Good to see you, sir.
It's good to see you, distinguished members of the committee, Representative O'Neill. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you today and share our number one building priority at Macon State College, Phase 2 of the Professional Sciences Center. The first phase, now named the Charles H. Jones Building, was completed in 2004 and today houses one of the largest nursing programs in the state and all of the college's facilities for teaching the sciences and mathematics. Phase 2 of the Professional Sciences Center is a 100,000 square foot facility that is ranked second on the Regent's priority list and is one of the university system's capital projects included in the governor's budget recommendation. You funded the design for this project at $1.1 million over the past 2 years. With those appropriations, we have completed 100% of the design and construction drawings. A construction manager has been selected, and we are ready to break ground when approval is received. The building was first endorsed by the Board of Regents in fiscal year '99 as a part of the system's capital improvement program. Since then, Macon State has grown both in its access and baccalaureate missions. As you can see in the handouts, Macon State has grown over 75% in student enrollment, and our credit hour production has doubled, and we continue to grow. The Regent's recommendation was the right decision at that time and certainly the right decision today. This proposed building will provide classroom and faculty office space for 2 academic divisions at Macon State, the Division of Information Technology and the Division of Business. These 2 divisions have a combined enrollment of 1,670 students. These 2 divisions, along with the health sciences and teacher education programs, represent our signature academic programs, those that have the greatest impact on the people of Central Georgia in its economy. The Division of Business offers degree programs that are in the greatest demand among all students. This division outgrew its original facility some years ago and is now housed temporarily in the Student Life Center. The Division of Information Technology is currently located in a small 38-year-old general classroom facility that was never intended to support high-tech programs. This environment severely limits our ability to teach this relatively new and complex discipline that is the driving force behind the new knowledge economy. When we began planning for this building almost 10 years ago, we believed that business and information technology would be so closely linked in the future that bringing them together would establish the most powerful learning environment we could hope to create for Middle Georgians. We know now that we were right on target. Another component of this building, representing about 30% of its gross square footage, will be devoted to meeting space. Being located at the crossroads of Georgia, Macon State is heavily used as a meeting and conference site by the university system and many other state agencies. Most weeks, we host several educational and training programs for state employees and teachers from all across Georgia. In a typical year, we accommodate more than 30,000 visitors, and in the process, save other state agencies a substantial amount of travel money and time. We think this is a good way to do the state's business, and with this facility, we can better serve this need. In a nutshell, that is an overview of the Macon State College project. My colleagues and I will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Representative O'Neill.
Dr. Bell, welcome to your capital. Glad to have you here. Your enthusiasm was always inspirational to me. I've watched your career at Macon State for quite some time, and every second of that watch has been impressive to me. Thank you for your presentation. I certainly want to make it clear that I 100% support the major project for the science building on the Macon campus, but I also want to make the committee aware that there is a minor's request that was not in the governor's budget for the Warner Robins campus, which, for those of you that might not know, is literally at the front gates of Georgia's single largest employer, Robins Air Force Base. And anybody in Middle Georgia, there are probably 40 counties in the Middle Georgia area collectively that go out 100 miles every way that have people that work at Robins Air Force Base. And there's any number of intertwined programs with Macon State that has stepped up in every way that have to do with the logistics planning for Homeland Security to everything they do for our national defense there at Robins Air Force Base, including the maintenance of all of our military aircraft. And the Macon State College campus at Warner Robins has certainly been focused a lot on that mission, as well as probably one of the most cutting-edge educators new programs, and Dr. Bell can describe that better, but I certainly want to urge the committee to consider also putting in the budget a minor's request that's now been in the budget for the last 4 or 5 years, as I recall, to expand that campus for some much needed space. with its, especially with its relationship with Robins Air Force Base. And the city of Warner Robins and several foundation people have stepped up there at the Warner Robins campus and partnered with Macon State and the state of Georgia with library resources and all sorts of things. So I mean, there's skin in the game everywhere, and the next and final step there is this expansion. And I hope this committee will also be aware of that and give some serious consideration of that request as well. And if I could just ask Dr. Bell if he would speak to that element as well, just for a minute or so.
Yes. The Warner Robins campus has almost 2,000 students. It offers academic offerings in the Bachelor of Science degrees in Information Technology, Business and Information Technology, Nursing, Early Childhood Education, and the complete core curriculum. Currently enrolled in the campus are 1,934 students. It's part of our partnership with the base is as follows. I understand that over the next 4 years, the Air Force Base, which has 25,000 people on it, only 6,000 or 7,000 in uniform, that over the next 4 years, 50% of the employees at the Air Force Base will be in a position to retire. We're attempting to do two things. One, we're working to upgrade essentially the white-collar folks at the base by offering baccalaureate degrees that they can take and have it, particularly in management and in other areas. And secondly, we are producing students who I think would be good candidates to help with the workforce at the Air Force Base. By the way, Warner Robins, the economic impact of the Robins Air Force Base is $4.2 billion on this. Its principal economic driver for the military and civilian employment exceeding 24,000 and an annual payroll of $1.2 billion plus a retiree payroll of $491 million. So it is a huge enterprise. It is the economic development engine of all of Central Georgia.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Bell. Appreciate you being here with us and sharing the good news.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Dr. Sharon Rigsby is the Gwinnett Technical College. Appreciate you being here.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members, and I'm pleased to be here this morning. We have a one-page handout that we're giving you that really encapsulates what we're asking for, but I'll talk about really some of the philosophy behind what we're asking for today because we feel like it's so important at this exact time. We're asking for a 78,000 square foot life sciences building to expand our capacity in life sciences and biosciences, and I know you see this request from a lot of colleges that the whole health sciences arena is growing throughout the state, but we feel like there are a particular set of circumstances in Gwinnett right now that make this extremely important. I wanted to share these with you. We know, of course, that these programs will directly support two of the governor's workforce industries and indirectly two more, the agribusiness and the environmental. We have just been through a year-long county visioning process that has told us exactly how many industries we need to concentrate on in the coming years, and there are 5, and one of them is health sciences as well. We have found out that the county, through the process of this visioning, the county has a really dangerously low concentration of healthcare workers as compared with other areas in the state and the nation. We have a bioscience joint development authority that has been working to bring the bioscience sector to this area between Gwinnett and Athens for 8 years, and we've been a part of that. And Gwinnett Tech and Athens Tech have just been awarded a $1.9 million grant, Department of Labor federal grant in support of the bioscience industry. We know that the governor wants to grow bioscience in Georgia. We also know that we've lost a couple of projects in this past year because they felt like we didn't have an adequate trained workforce for their current and future needs. And we have a project on the table right now, Project Bamboo, that is considering a site that is right between Athens Technical College and Gwinnett Technical College to bring the first bioscience company to our area. So we're very hopeful that they'll select this particular area and that we will be able to meet their needs. So bioscience is kind of one of those areas that has been growing in momentum, whether you talk to the community leaders, the chamber, the hospital executives who've been so very supportive of this. Bioscience is something the whole area is looking to with great interest. But that's just the bioscience. Our health science program is enormous. This last year we had 13,000 applicants, and half of those applicants were for health science programs, and we turned away 4,680 of them. So we have the interest, we have the applicants in the community, we have the jobs that are vacant right now. We have almost 500 vacant nursing jobs in Gwinnett right now. What we don't have is the capacity to serve people in these critical areas. And we know that our county is only going to keep growing. We have 760,000 residents in our county now, and it is estimated that we'll be right at 1 million by 2015. So we know that the healthcare situation is only going to become more and more important both to our local economy and really the state in general. The exact programs that are going to be expanded or added are on the handouts that you have before you, and I'll be glad to take any questions you may have.
I'll catch up with you later.
Can I do it again for you?
Any questions? Any questions? Thank you very much for being here. I will catch up with you later about your one-on-one. Will you be in town today?
I'll be wherever you want me to be, because
love
you know that
we
are interested in doing this with Athens Tech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Who's next? Dr. Sanford Chandler with Appalachian Technical College. And by the way, while I'm sitting here, I have a button on my lapel that says, keep Delta my Delta. I encourage you to keep Delta your Delta too, because you heard the turf guy a while ago say that Delta does yeoman's work moving turf around the world. So let's keep this Georgia company a Georgia company. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you so much. Representative Smith, I certainly appreciate the time to present this important project to you and the Committee for Higher Education and Appropriations. I want to start out by saying this project is something that was in the planning in 1995 and was submitted first for capital outlay request in 2000. This is the 7th year in a row that we've requested this facility, and since that time Cherokee County has grown from 141,000 people to somewhere around 189,000. Substantial growth curve in Cherokee as one of the fastest growing counties in Georgia. Appalachian Technical College is located the main campus is located in Jasper. Cherokee County continues to grow, and our ability to serve Cherokee County is hampered by not having a physical facility. In fact, Cherokee County has no public post-secondary education institution within its county. Some statistics about Cherokee County. The American Business Chronicle recognized Cherokee County as one of the nation's top 15 counties in potential business growth. We have consistently experienced 10% business growth per year, And we have been recognized as an entrepreneur-friendly community. We're a certified literate community, and we have 14 established industrial parks. The job growth that's expected, according to the Atlanta Regional Commission, between now and 2030, just in Cherokee County, are 73,000 new jobs. That's about 3,200 jobs a year. Within that 73,000, in the Bluffs Technology Park, expected to have 15,000 new jobs alone. Even with that job growth, 69% of the people living in Cherokee County drive out of the county to go to work every day. Our school system is growing at an exponential rate of about 4,400 people per year, students per year. So the county has taken on the initiative of what do we need to do from an economic and workforce development standpoint. We've tried to facilitate the education of the population there through some given properties and through some small rental spaces, but it's been totally inadequate to train such a massive workforce. So in undertaking this, the county put together an economic alliance which included all of the government officials, community officials, civic and government leaders, as well as education leaders throughout the community, and developed an economic strategic plan. I wanted to read you some data from that economic strategic plan. 56% of the businesses surveyed said they had difficulty finding qualified employees. 79% said their new hires needed additional training. Said 1/3 of all the new employees needed technical training beyond high school, but less than a 4-year degree. That's about 30% of them, at least. And 45% said that the workforce was average for these new businesses coming in. So they developed a plan, and in that plan they listed the specific industries that needed to be served. You have a handout that's a one-page handout that shows the programs that we will begin to offer. All of those programs fall within the top 3 programs requested under the strategic plan to help alleviate the workforce needs of the community. Subsequent to that, the county has realized that this is a significant need. You'll also notice on that handout that through property donations, and Representative Smith, I know you have seen the property donations as well as in-kind services equate to $5.2 million. The county is requesting, and Appalachian Tech's requesting, this facility for $14.4 million, and the county is willing to put up almost half of that amount in money, actually, because it is the property and it is the goods and services they're beginning to bring forth. So the study has been done. We've really looked at this project. The county's looked at it. The schools looked at it. The need's been established. We know that. The community is 100% behind us. Representative Hamilton's here with us today. We certainly appreciate him being here. Local money's been allocated. It's been planned. They're prepared for this facility, and it is very much needed as an economic engine for this community in trying to create quality jobs within Cherokee County. So I'm here today to ask you, please help us deliver the quality technical education they so need within Cherokee County. And so I am requesting this $14.4 million to construct this classroom building to provide these programs to help with the economic development of Cherokee County. And I will entertain questions.
Thank you. Any questions? I've got a comment. I had the pleasure to meet with you, and I think Representative Charlene Bird was with us today, and she's with us here. And
Bird and Representative Jurgensen as well.
I think Representative Graves is part, but Representative Calvin Hill has absolutely worn us out on this.
Good.
Representative
That's what we
Calvin
paid
Hill
him to
and
do.
Charlene and Representative Byrd have worn us out on this. But I must tell you, that site that you have is a dynamite location.
Oh, absolutely.
And the fact that the community has come together so vehemently to produce these goods, I appreciate your comments.
Yeah. Well, I certainly appreciate the representatives being here, and all of them are 100%. I can tell you every representative is 100% behind it.
It's a growing area up
And
there.
I have not had one.
There's Representative Hill now, so I was just bragging on you.
Representative Hill, I will turn it over to him.
Your ears must have been burning. But thank you very much.
I will turn it over to him. He will take on.
Thank you. Next is Dr. Dan Papp at Kennesaw State University, former Vice Chancellor at the university system. Appreciate you here with us, and we're looking forward to your comments.
Thank you, Representative Smith.
You doing good up there?
Absolutely enjoying it, and I think we're doing good. We've got a number of folks from Kennesaw State here in the audience, so you better ask them, because I'm prejudiced. I'll say, yeah, absolutely.
Do you see Dr. Siegel much?
We see Dr. Siegel very frequently, yes, sir.
She loves that place. Loves it.
Absolutely does. She did a wonderful job up there as president, and as a matter of fact, we've got her back on working with us, helping develop a doctoral program in ethics and leadership, and she's also going to be teaching some classes.
That's smart to get that institutional knowledge, because she certainly has it.
Yes, sir. Absolutely correct.
Good. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, sir, and thank you very much for all of you being here today. I'm here to make a presentation on the funding request for the Health Sciences Building at Kennesaw State University. It is in the governor's budget this year for $42.5 million. We have another $13 million of private funds that we are adding to the funds for a $55 million overall project. The Wellstar School of Nursing at Kennesaw State University last year produced the second highest number of nurses in the university system of Georgia, behind only the Medical College of Georgia. We also last year implemented a master's degree program in nursing education to help provide additional nurses for the next generation of students. We are working under the good leadership of Dr. Richard Saul, the Dean of our College of Nursing, our College of Health and Human Services, on a doctorate in nursing sciences program, which we will be bringing forward to the Board of Regents later this year. We have also developed a very significant partnership with Wellstar Health Systems, the largest healthcare delivery provider in the state of Georgia. As a matter of fact, that partnership is so extensive, and they have provided via Wellstar such significant funds to Kennesaw State that it is the Wellstar College of Health and Human Services, and within that it is the Wellstar School of Nursing as well. All of that having been said, last year we had to turn away approximately 1,600 qualified nursing students who applied for admission to the Wellstar School of Nursing. In addition to the work that I've already laid out in front of you, we are also cooperating with Appalachian Technical College, and if Dr. Sanford Chandler had, I think Dr. Chandler has left, Dr. Chandler would, we're still here. Sanford can tell you we're working with Sanford up in Cherokee County to put together a cooperative program between Kennesaw State and Appalachian Tech as well to provide additional nurses for Northwest Georgia, Cherokee County, and surrounding counties as well. The second sheet of the handout that you have provides a general artist rendering of what the new building would in fact look like. Our Chief of Facilities, Mr. John Anderson, who is also here with us today, has been working even this morning to select the actual design team to move forward with it. The third sheet that you have provides a look at where the building would go on campus. It is an absolutely critical part of the future of Kennesaw State University. Kennesaw State, with our 20,000 students, provides and concentrates not only on nursing and health sciences but also in other areas critical to the state of Georgia as well. Teacher education, business, biology, chemistry. These are all central parts of our effort at Kennesaw State University. Currently, we are graduating a little over 200 students per year. With this building, we would be able to expand our graduates in nursing to almost 300 students a year, a significant growth in the number of graduates that we would have. That obviously means we would be able to accept a lot more students as well. We graduate approximately 95% of the students who are accepted into our nursing program. That is an incredibly high graduation rate. We have very, very low attrition. In addition to the nurses, we would also have being served in this building about 400 additional students, or I should say we would graduate with this building on the ground an additional 400 students in other areas, to include social work, health professions, allied health professions, sports science professionals, and also some biomedical students who would move on then to the Medical College of Georgia, regardless of whether it be in Augusta or in Athens. Of the total size of the building, it will be about 120,000 square feet of assignable space in the building. About 60% of that assignable space would be specifically for instruction. Most of it would be directed specifically for classroom instruction, laboratories for nursing and health sciences, and also some introductory level laboratories as well for chemistry and biology. Obviously, if you're going into the health sciences, you also need to have your introductory courses in chemistry, in biology, in anatomy, etc. So this would all be part of the package that we are providing within the health sciences building. There would also be, of course, administrative space and office space. There will be about 120 faculty offices in the building. We have about 80 full-time faculty members in the Wellstar College of Health and Human Services. We also have about 80 part-time faculty. So, of course, all of our full-time faculty would get an office. Our part-time faculty would double up in the offices as well. We would also have advisement centers. We would also have clinical placement space and other support spaces as well. So this is an absolutely critical part of the effort for Kennesaw State University to continue to move forward to help us help the state of Georgia meet the critical needs that the state has. So with that as a formal presentation, I'd like to open the floor for questions.
Any questions? I have one. It was relating to the number of students. Looks like 686 new students would be created per year with this facility. Is that what you're saying? 286 and 400?
We would wind up graduating about 686 students. We're currently graduating in all of the programs that are in the Health and Human Sciences College about 350 students per year. So we would have an expansion then. We would have an expansion up to almost 700.
So that'd be a net gain of 700.
No, sir. A net annual gain of about 350. Mm-hmm. We're currently at about 350. We would go up to about 700 annual graduates in the health sciences and nursing.
Mm-hmm. Representative O'Neill.
Did I hear you? Is the project cost $55 million? Is that what you said total?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
And it's 120,000 square feet?
That's of assignable space.
Why so much? I mean, we've got a 100,000 square foot project right before you, and it's $20 million. And it's a health science. Why? Why is yours going to cost so much?
This particular building is a building that has large quantities of lab space in it, large quantities of scientific-oriented buildings, scientific-oriented space, and those are what runs up the cost. These would be wet labs, which run the cost up tremendously.
Again, I'm not beating on you, but the building I'm comparing it to is a 100,000 health science building with labs and all that. It's about $220 a foot to construct. My calculations or yours are almost 500 a foot. I don't understand.
This was assignable square feet. John Anderson is our director of facilities.
Right. It's 190,000 square foot gross, and we're at about $235 a square foot. So we're a little bit higher than the project you're comparing us to.
190 gross.
Right.
The 120 is assignable for labs and classrooms. The others offices, as I understood it.
Right, and it's a $45 million construction budget. So if you look at the construction cost and you're taking 190,000 square foot, we're right at $235 a square foot for construction cost.
Okay, thank you.
Did I hear you correctly when you said that you got $15 million raised through a foundation to match your request to the state? Is that what's the amount of the foundation of personal giving?
We are raising $13 million.
$13 million.
Yes, sir.
So the total is 55.5.
55.5.
Okay. Representative Lane.
You said you had a 95% graduation rate, or those that entered the program that completed. How do you get such a high number of
we have good students and a great faculty recruited by Richard.
Must do a good job of qualifying them or accepting them or whatever.
I'm sorry?
You must do a great job of qualifying them before they are able to enter or something.
We are fortunate in the sense that we are accepting students that are right at the top of their game. Yes, sir.
That's fantastic. That's such a good job.
Any other questions?
Yes, sir.
Representative Floyd.
Like I say, I was also fascinated with the graduation rate. Thank you. But the graduation rate there is most of this local Cherokee, Fulton, Cobb County students.
Yes, sir. Most of it is local students from Northwest Georgia. That having been said, on the way down, I asked that specific question of our dean, and Dean Soul said that while most of our students are in fact from Northwest Georgia and Atlanta, we have students from the Chattanooga suburbs down to Moultrie, Georgia coming in. I think that's a fair paraphrase of what you said, Richard.
Thank you. Very good.
Any other questions? Any questions?
No, I just
thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Appreciate what you do. Dr. Flora Tidings at Athens Technical College.
Good morning.
Well, you disappeared from behind, appeared from behind the wall.
Just walked in.
I'm glad you're with us, Dr. Tidings. Look forward to your comments.
Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you this morning. First of all, I would like to start out by saying that Athens Technical College is proud of the reputation it has for training healthcare individuals in Northeast Georgia. The biomanufacturing and life science facility proposed for the Athens campus will give us the opportunity to expand current offerings and introduce new programs of study. Well, why do we need a new facility? Why can't we continue to use the one that we have? Well, over the past 33 years, this facility has served us well, but we've outgrown it. Over the last year, we turned away 1,500 individuals that we could not put into our programs. Now, these were not students that were waiting in line to get into programs or getting into the college. These were students that had already taken their core courses at Athens Technical College and were ready to enter a healthcare training program. But we simply did not have room to put them into the program. The new building will allow us to add an additional 80,000 square feet to our campus. This will allow us to increase our student enrollment by over 1,000 students, bringing our total allied health enrollment up to 1,300. Excuse me. The new programs that we look to add on the campus would be those in paramedic, bioinformatics, and other individual healthcare courses that would help us to add cardiovascular and nuclear medicine, pharmacy tech, neuromuscular, and geriatric training programs. We are a key player in the biotechnology industry. We've been involved with the University of Georgia to help in bioinformation technology training. We've been providing employers in this workforce for over 16 years. We see that area continuing to grow, not only for the state of Georgia, but particularly for Northeast Georgia and for the 316 corridor. We look again that we have the 316 corridor going from Atlanta to Augusta to be a high player with a 36% growth over the next few years in bioinformation technology. All of these programs that we are looking at adding were determined to have high job growth rate in our region, and this was based on a study that was done by the University of Georgia Small Business Development Center. In order for us to expand into this market again, we need to have more space to grow. ATC currently serves the largest countywide service area, over 10 counties in Northeast Georgia. We go all the way from Hart County down to our southernmost county, Greene. We've been participating with the University of Georgia to provide lab space for training for students in order to increase the number of individuals that we have going into the biotechnology training arena. This has allowed us to provide quality control, fermentation, and aseptic fill positions in that area. In December, it was announced that we were successful in obtaining a $2 million federal Department of Labor grant. This again will provide for us to put new equipment into the labs that we'll be able to put into this building. We will also be providing high school science and math instructors with updated curriculum in this area so that they again will help to provide a pipeline for individuals that are interested in going into biotechnology. And it will also provide training to incumbent workers that are currently being laid off in manufacturing areas. Now, while Athens Technical College has been operating in what we consider to be less than ideal space, we've also continued to have a quality and an excellence that's unsurpassed in the state of Georgia. Our programs rank at 97% pass rate on all of their national and state exams or higher, with the exception of one program, Surge Tech, which only has an 87% pass rate, but ranks number 2 in the nation, second only to the University of Nevada in Las Vegas, and we think they play with their numbers. I would like to show you a rendering of the building. This is what the proposed building would look like located on our campus. And this is where it would be situated on our campus. We did design this building in 2 phases. You'll notice that we have Wing A and Wing B. Wing A is what we're asking for funding for from the legislators this year. Wing B we are trying to privately fund. We are in the midst of a capital campaign. We have at this point raised close to $2 million to put toward this endeavor. The community supports this project. All of Northeast Georgia supports this project. And it would be a great economic benefit to the citizens of Georgia to be able to provide a trained workforce in this arena. No, excuse me. I do also have a booklet that I would like to pass out to you. A one-page handout that adequately describes the building, telling you the price range and the dimensions of the building, and also just one piece of information that I'd like to share with you, because this was in the Athens Banner Herald on Friday, and it's a letter from a constituent that wrote in about their hospital stay and how much the allied health programs at Athens Tech have impacted their lives. Are there any questions that I can answer for you?
Thank you for being here, Dr. Tidings. Any questions?
What was the total student population that you service?
Right now, we're able to take 250 students into our healthcare programs total.
Obviously, I have a couple of questions to lead you with a little bit. You alluded to the University of Georgia and biotech and nanotechnology and the like. Do you have any partnerships on the University of Georgia campus related to that?
We do. We currently have two very strong partnerships with the University of Georgia. One is in our veterinary tech program, where we do all of our live animal training at the University of Georgia. We don't house any animals on the Athens Tech campus, and that's a partnership that we've had that's fairly ongoing. The other is in the biotechnology arena, where we are currently using lab space at what was their old science building, that they had some space that they currently have not gone in to use, and they're allowing us to use it until our new building is built and out of the ground. This helps us to put in place the fermentation, the quality control, and the aseptic fill programs that we need to already have individuals trained in, primarily because we are trying to recruit a biopharma company to that area, and it's very important that we have a trained workforce in that area. We also are in partnership with the University of Georgia in the NBATH project that they're currently working on.
The reason I asked that question is because the area has been primed for some type of development to come in. You allude to the biopharmaceutical company, and then Georgia's on the short list for the agro-biodefense facility, which is a huge thing that I understand. Is Athens the only one on the short list in Georgia?
Yes, that's correct.
So how would what you're doing there in partnership with the biotech at the University of Georgia, the animal sciences building that just been completed on campus, how would this benefit the whole scheme?
For individual companies that are coming into our area, about 60% of their workers need the 2-year associate degree level training. They have a percentage, probably about 5%, that are PhD trained individuals, and then there is about 20% under that would need 4-year degree. But the majority of their workforce is going to be made up of lab technicians that need the type of training we provide at Athens Technical College.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Tidings.
Thank you.
See you later. University of West Georgia. We used to have Dr. Sethna. Now we have someone else.
I'm definitely not Dr. Sethna.
You're not.
The committee may wish that it would Dr. Sethna. But
yes, sir.
I'm Tim Hines, and I'm presently serving as acting president of the university, while Dr. Sethna serves as interim chief academic officer and executive vice chancellor for the university system. And I know I speak for him and the rest of the West Georgia community by starting to express my appreciation and our appreciation for the opportunity to speak in support of the FF&E, the furniture, fixtures, and equipment component of the Health, Wellness, and Lifelong Learning Center. We're appreciative to the governor for his inclusion in the request of his budget, and we're certainly appreciative to you, Representative Smith, and the rest of the committee for this opportunity to speak on behalf of this proposal, as well as other components, if asked, about the governor's budget and the associated budget of the university system in Georgia. I briefly want to do 3 things. I first want to give a brief introduction to the University of West Georgia. I know if I didn't brag at least a little bit about the University of West Georgia, you would be disappointed knowing that Dr. Sethna would be bound to do that under any circumstances. But I'll do that quite briefly. I second will briefly talk about the purposes of the funding that is requested in this budget, and finally give you an opportunity to ask any questions you might. I really do hope that if you haven't done so, that some of you would come visit us in Carrollton. The traffic is a little bit lighter traveling towards the west than it is around in other directions. Our fall enrollments are in excess of 10,000, with consistent growth averaging about 3% a year over the last 10 years. And like other portions of the university system, we face the challenge of demographics. The largest Georgia high school class ever around 2010 or 2011, with more students seeking higher education as a part of their quest for the American dream. Like so many others of my generation, I'm the first graduate from college and was part of my parents' ability to use public education in another state to fulfill the American dream. We believe there will even be a greater number of such students beyond those demographics as Chancellor Davis's commitment to providing a more educated Georgia combined with Secretary Cox's commitment to increasing the level of preparation for K-12 students will increase demands not only at West Georgia but throughout the university system of Georgia. At the University of West Georgia, our strategic vision, which is highlighted by our identity, educational excellence in a personal environment, includes selected doctoral programs, other graduate programs in our 3 colleges providing advanced preparations in professions, and undergraduate programs rooted in liberal education, culminating in undergraduate research experiences, applied learning activities, applied technology in learning. Our senior administrators all teach regularly as we connect with our core business of students. Our Advanced Academy and Honors College provide exceptional opportunities for advanced students. Goldwater Marshall Scholars, Georgia Teachers of the Year, and Regional Entrepreneurs of the Year all share the University of West Georgia in their resume. To the request. Let me summarize briefly the request in the governor's and in the university system's budget. The $3 million request for FF&E is the final part of a 3-part funding for this project. The University System Board of Regents and the State Georgia Construction Manual places funding in 3 different areas: in design, in construction, and FF&E. The wisdom of the governor and the legislature funded the first 2 parts of this in previous sessions. In your wisdom, we are extraordinarily appreciative of that earlier support. However, the building has to be furnished. Chairs have to be sat in, desks have to be available, equipment has to be networked, technology has to be made available. As with all of our construction activities in the last several years, we invest in connectivity and laboratory equipment needed for student and faculty research requirements and the furnishing needing to allow for real use of the facility. In completion, it will be one more step in West Georgia's ability to make contributions to having enough space to create a more educated Georgia. Let me close where I began. I want to thank you for your support, for your kind attention, and I would obviously be delighted to answer any questions that I could. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Any comments, questions?
I believe we have some handouts if you haven't received them.
Can't.
Oh, you have?
We're fine.
All is well with the world.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Is there any doubt about funding the furniture, fixtures, and equipment? Is there any doubt about that? I just want to know if there's any doubt about funding this. If they've already built the building, why is a question mark in furniture?
You want to do that? Is Dr. Clough here? We're running. We're moving fairly quickly, so the next is Dr. Clough. We're 15 minutes early here, so we may stand at ease until Dr. Clough gets here.
He is on his way. He is just not here
Well,
yet.
we're early, so
Okay.
and that's a good thing for the committee. So thank you.
He should be here any minute.
Hey, is any business to come to the committee? Anybody that you'd like to have invited to come to the meeting? Because I brought 3 in today that I wanted y'all to hear, and I thought they were quite interesting. Any people that you'd like to see come before the committee? We're going to have Zoo Atlanta to come in sometime tomorrow. That's not on the schedule, and to talk about the funding request that they have. And I'm trying to think of what's down your way, Representative Lane.
Georgia Southern University is down my way. I'd like to get you Technical College is down my way. And we really don't have a lot of money in the budget for either one of them.
Georgia Southern had.
None of them.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
If you open up that invitation, I'll have 2 here tomorrow.
Well, have you seen the list for tomorrow? You seen it?
Bill,
if you haven't, if you could tell your colleagues. Don't want to pass that to you.
while we at ease, do you want
We've
Dr.
got.
Bill Goten?
Who's that?
Dr. Bill Goten is here with Georgia Southern University, and I do have an issue that
Yes, sir.
I would like this committee to hear.
We're here.
That Bill, are you prepared to do anything?
Certainly.
All right.
Welcome to opportunity. Wait a minute. Well, let me do a little introduction here. I got to brag on you and Dr. Gruby because y'all come to Watkinsville and sit with me at the Big Easy while I brag about our grits.
That's right. We love your grits.
Yeah.
We love Watkinsville.
This was not staged, and he has no idea that I was going to call on him. So I hope you're prepared to say a little something about it. I know you.
I'll do my best.
We've discussed some issues that are really critical to us and critical to the university.
Will you introduce yourself to the members?
I'm Bill Golden.
Dr. Bill Golden.
Well, Dr. Bill Golden, but I'm Director of Governmental Relations at Georgia Southern University. I think I know most of you, all of you, in fact. I welcome this opportunity, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you giving me a few minutes while you're at ease to talk about an issue that's very important to us. It's an issue that deals with eminent scholars. Some of you on the committee I know are familiar. 8, 9, 10 years ago, the state started an eminent scholar program that was parallel but not the same as the eminent scholars with the Georgia Research Alliance. But it was designed for colleges like Southwest and Albany and Valdosta and Georgia Southern, the smaller colleges, to be able to go out and solicit funds to employ an eminent scholar, and then the state would match that amount that we raised. And the way it was structured is that if the institutions raised $500,000, $500,000, then the state would match that with $500,000, and that would give the institutions $1 million endowment that they would use only the proceeds from the interest or the earnings on an annual basis to supplement the salary of an eminent scholar. They would be able to go out and hire an eminent scholar, bring that scholar in, and that scholar would be responsible for certainly attracting some grant money, providing an opportunity for students to do research with that eminent scholar and enhance their ability as students, and at the same time enhance whatever area that they were brought into the institution for. We have several at Georgia Southern. We have one in public health, one in free enterprise, and they've been very successful. But this is probably the best single fundraising tool that institutions of our size have to raise private dollars, because large dollars. If we can go to an individual and tell them that if they will give us $500,000 and we can match it with $500,000 from the state, then it certainly enhances our ability to raise significant funds at Georgia Southern and institutions of our size. We have 4 of these scholars at Georgia Southern that we have full funding from the private sector, but we do not have any match from the state. As you know, several years ago when the budget got depressed, we were in a situation where we were trying to get operating dollars. We weren't trying to get any other dollars, and this program just sort of fell by the wayside for a few years. But it's a very critical program. I know the Georgia Southern, and I think there's somewhere between 17 and 20 in the Regents packet, in the entire system. So it's not only important to Georgia Southern, it's important to a lot of the institutions throughout the state. We would like very much to see this program revitalized, and we certainly would be interested in working with this committee to see if there's any possibility of adding 1 or 2 of these scholars in the budget for this year. And I'd be glad to answer any questions relating to this issue.
You've run out of time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for those encouraging words. And before we go to the next guest, is any request for someone to come before this committee? I'd certainly love to take it, and let us know, and because it may be on the list tomorrow. We have a list tomorrow of probably 12 or 15 guests. So I encourage you to do that. If we can't get it this time, we'll do it next week. But Dr. Clough from Georgia Tech, that trade school on North Avenue, if you'll step forward. And we saved you. We built up enough time for you, sir. Let's see, it's 11:20. We saved you 45 minutes instead of 30. But anyways, if you could go with that. We're delighted that you're here with us, and I'm not a rambling wreck from Georgia Tech, but my son was, and I appreciate all that y'all did for my son.
Once you get a degree from Georgia Tech, it's for life.
Yes, sir. It was an incredible experience, and I'm going to have to do it one more time. I know I did it in the body yesterday in my morning orders, and that the apple, the tree falls not too far. How's it go? The apple falls straight down from the tree. The apple falls straight from the tree. Talking about my oldest son that graduated from this great institution we call North Avenue Trade School. And he graduated with highest honors from the School of Architecture, and I'm proud as a papa to say that. And thank you for what y'all do to help him.
Well, thank you very much. I had the pleasure to meet him, and he's a delightful young man.
Thank you.
He is certainly a delightful young man, and will be a credit to the family as well as to Georgia Tech.
Thank you, sir.
I know he's already gainfully employed, which is important, right? Mr. Chairman, thank you and the committee for allowing me to have a little time to speak to you about Georgia Tech, because it's my favorite subject when people ask me to make a public presentation, so I'm always glad to have that opportunity. Thank you for your service to the state and your interest in higher education, and we appreciate it very much. We are about to crank up our PowerPoint. Lynn, how's it going?
I'm sorry.
Trying to? Do we have handouts for all the folks?
Okay. We got them.
I'm going to go ahead and get started, and then when the PowerPoint catches up, it catches up. Otherwise, we can just follow it from the handout that you have. Georgia Tech starts out with our tagline, and that is, we like to say we're defining the technological research university of the 21st century. And we chose that rather than doing the more obvious thing to say we want to be number one or we want to be in the top 10, because we said we may want to do the things that we do in a different way than others. And in essence, when we get there, we believe others will say, well, why didn't we think about going in that direction? And it's a high standard to be held to for everything we do, and we think it's very helpful to us. So it's a big challenge, but fortunately we have, I think, about 94 more years to get it done. So we're still within the 21st century to work on it. The second subject I want to talk about is another one of my favorites, and that would be our students. We have 17,933 students enrolled at Georgia Tech. We're enrolled at Georgia Tech for this year, including, and it's on the slide, which is what is not up right now, Bob's son. 12,357 undergraduates, so a very large undergraduate program, 5,576 graduate students. So we have a very large graduate program as well. I want to point out that our enrollment has grown significantly over the last decade, over 4,000 students in growth at Georgia Tech, and I'll explain some of the reasons for that subsequently. But part of it has to do with the fact that we are trying to, we've created some majors in the sciences that support the engineering programs that we have that have grown, and in the computer science area, and those have grown. We're also proud of the fact that we are a national leader in graduating women and minority engineers. Hispanic Business Magazine, for example, just named us as one of the top 5 schools for Hispanic students to study engineering. Diverse Issues in Higher Education, which focuses on African Americans, is identified as the only school to have ever graduated the largest number of African American engineering students at the undergraduate, master's, and PhD level simultaneously. And so we work hard at diversity. We talk about access, and there's a lot of discussion in the public domain today about access. The Chancellor certainly has spoken to access as an important issue for the state of Georgia to young people to get an education, a college education, which is becoming ever more important as the world becomes more sophisticated and more technologically connected. Well, so how do you create access, and what's Georgia Tech's role in that? First of all, we have a low tuition, especially for our in-state students. We have a peer set that was agreed upon with the Board of Regents and ourselves. There are about 20 institutions on that peer set, and we're 19th out of 20 in terms of our tuition. So that's the base point. That's a good place to start. We want to keep that tuition relatively reasonable for our students. In addition, for those students who want to seek some work experience, we have what we believe is the finest co-op program in the country. It is voluntary. A few places require it. It's voluntary at Georgia Tech. We have the largest voluntary co-op program in the country. Over 2,700 students worked their way through Georgia Tech. I did as a student. It is a great way to go to school. You help earn not all of your expenses, but a good advance towards your expenses to get your education at Georgia Tech. We also have a very strong internship program for those who don't want to do the full co-op program, which is a full 5-year degree if you do co-op. Almost 10% of our students, I'd point out, are on receive Pell Grants, and that's an important point to us. That means these are folks that have qualified for Pell. That's a federal grant program for students who have low financial base. And if you wanted to use it roughly speaking, that would be for students with families whose annual income is somewhere $30,000 or less per year. So 10% is a high number. That means a lot of financially disadvantaged students are able to come to Georgia Tech. I will say we're concerned about continuing that. We need that to happen. I came from a family of modest means. No one in my family had gone to college before, and so it was important to me to go to Georgia Tech and have that co-op program. We're worried about those students, and we want to make sure that they stay at Georgia Tech and have an opportunity to serve. Very shortly, we'll be announcing a special program to address those students with special needs. We know the Hope Scholarship is a tremendous program, but that doesn't cover room and board. And if you come from a family with less than $30,000 a year in income, you're going to struggle to have to pay for the room and board, even if you've got the Hope Scholarship. And so we are concerned about access, particularly for those students who are low income. And many of those, in fact, it turns out, are minority students or students from rural areas. And we want to start trying to address that with a special program. We'll do that based on private funding at this point, and that's something that we think is important. Obviously, a big part of our mission is engineering education, and we want to address all the access points that we have for engineering education. To start with, we have the largest engineering program in the country, largest number of graduates each year in engineering in the country, and we have a very broad-based engineering program and one that's ranked very highly. Now, you will hear about sometimes our students as a challenge to get into Georgia Tech at the freshman level. We've begun to work on those kinds of issues. First of all, we have the Regents Engineering Transfer Program, and over 200 students can go to any of the 12 institutions that participate and transfer to Georgia Tech. And that's the capacity builder for us, because our choke point is the freshman year with all the labs that are required. So if these students can go to the 2-year schools, the ones that we work closely with, and do reasonably well there, they'll transfer and come right into Georgia Tech. And they don't have to have the test scores that you need to get in the fall with the freshman class. So it gives us a second entry point for lots of students at Tech. We also have created a more vigorous and open summer program. So if a student has a deficiency in a certain area, maybe their school didn't offer a calculus course or something like that, they can come in the summer and get that taken care of. And so we have a growing component in the summer. And then also, of course, we work with our partners down in the Savannah-Statesboro area to create what we call the Georgia Tech Regional Engineering Program. And that's a very robust partnership, and Bob certainly knows about that, with Georgia Southern, Savannah State, and Armstrong Atlantic State University. And those schools teach the first 2 years of engineering. The students then transfer into the Georgia Tech stream, but rather than coming to the Atlanta campus, they can stay on our Georgia Tech Savannah campus, which is a very nice campus off the freeway there, out of downtown Savannah, closer to Statesboro, and they can finish their degrees right there at home. And we already know we've graduated about 130 students through that route. And 70% of those students are staying in the Savannah-Statesboro area with those degrees, helping fill workforce needs down there, working very closely with companies like J.C. Bamford and Gulfstream to supply their needs for technical talent, and that's worked very well. Now, in addition, and I know that Chairman Smith is interested in using technology for learning, we have a very active program in internet learning, particularly at the master's level, although it does support our partnerships as well, and we're going to be doing more on that in the future using a new kind of technology we're very excited about. We're working on with Hewlett-Packard. But we have 485 students who are taking internet master's degrees at Georgia Tech. We offer 9 internet master's degrees at Tech, and it allows people to stay at their home and get their degree through the internet. Now, many times they'll come to campus periodically, but they can get their degrees. So we work hard to create access to engineering education. Another aspect that's sort of changed as far as the way we go about education is we're trying to create what we call a culture of success. In the old days, us old timers remember, folks weren't too much interested in whether or not you stuck around. But these days, we know we need all of these young people to graduate if we can, give them the opportunity. So we've reshaped our undergraduate educational experience with the intent to improve our retention and our graduation rates. Every student who doesn't graduate from Tech is a loss in terms of technological talent. If we can help them stay and succeed, it helps them, it helps us, it helps the state. And we've created an array of new options for our students to keep them engaged in education. Some of it's in the curriculum, but a lot of it is what we would call co-curricular, for example, international studies, independent research. These are things students can engage in small groups with faculty, and as opposed to going through the standard lecture mode in the classroom. And we're working on something we call leadership education. We think these young people need to learn to be leaders too, as well as good technology sort of folks. And as I said, we've worked on revising the curriculum to give students more options in defining their curriculum. Next slide, please. What it all amounts to is that what we're seeing is more and more of our students are graduating. More of our students are succeeding. First year retention now is up to 92%. 92% of our youngsters stay from the first year to the second year. We believe we can improve that even more. Graduation rate, which is a little tougher to move up because that's a 6-year rate, is up to 77%. It was 69% when I came to Georgia Tech. This is something I'm really proud of. This is not easy to move the needle on. As you know, the governor has spoken to this issue, the chancellor has spoken to this issue. We need to have our students graduate when we get them into the system. So we're working hard through these programs I just described and better advising and better financial aid support for our students to keep them there. You will notice on this particular slide, study abroad. Our students participating in study abroad has quadrupled since 1994. We're up to about 35% now before they graduate. Our goal is to get to 50%. We think we can do that. Over 40% of the students participate in undergraduate research in small groups with faculty. We're going to move that to 70%. We're working on that. So that's important, and these are the kind of things that we think are important to the state. We're very proud of the fact that our graduation rate now is #1 in the university system of Georgia. We know we can do better. We'll go over 80%, we think, by just a few years in order to do that. We also are succeeding, I think, in getting more of our youngsters to complete their PhDs at Georgia Tech because we are a research university. A statistic that has surprised me is that we awarded more PhD degrees since 1996 to today than we did in Georgia Tech's entire history to 1996. So something about the growth of that graduate program and, again, working with students and getting them to finish their degrees. That's a lot of technological talent flowing out that was not there before. A lot of credit for this goes to our great faculty at Georgia Tech. We have a tremendous faculty. They've received all kinds of recognitions. I cite some of those on this particular slide. I will not go through each one of those. I'll mention one. That's the NSF Career Award. That was created about 10 years ago by the National Science Foundation, recognizing outstanding young engineers and scientists who are succeeding at highest levels in teaching and research, who in essence are stars of the future. And they get 5-year grants when they are awarded this. It's a very special, very competitive award. 109 NSF Career Award winners at Georgia Tech today. That's important. That's second in the nation. That also means that places like Stanford, Harvard, Yale, MIT have less of those very bright and talented people. We are becoming an extremely competitive institution. I will also point out that when you have that sort of success and those big schools, those big endowments suddenly decide we need a very talented person in energy. Where could we get that person? Georgia Tech has good talent. Maybe we could lure them away. And we're seeing more and more competition for these people. Keeping them and retaining them is important. One of the ways we're retaining them is provide them a quality work-living environment. And our campus is very important to us. We have, since 1995, 7 million square feet of new and renovated space at Georgia Tech. We are very appreciative of the state's support that helped us do that, but we only asked the state for 20% of that. We raised 80% of it ourselves because we knew to go into places, as you can see on the far left there, that's our biotechnology complex of 4 buildings. Only one of those was built with state funding for construction. The other 3 were built by raising funds privately and generating our own internal resources. If we want to get into biotechnology, we have to move fast if we're going to compete with the big guys. And so we have taken it on ourselves to try to raise that money. What I would like to leave with you as a message You provide $1 to Georgia Tech, we create 4. Okay? So we are going to leverage your dollars. We still need your support. You give us your support, we promise you at Georgia Tech we're going to leverage it, and we're going to make more out of it. We're trying to create a campus that attracts students, the best students and the best faculty, and supports the success of our students and our faculty. One of those new buildings is the Marcus Nanotechnology Building, which you've probably heard about in the news. It will be the largest nanotechnology research center in the South, one of the largest actually in the world. 3 classes of clean rooms. I know Chairman Smith is an expert on nanotechnology. Classes of clean rooms. If you have a class 10 clean room, what you have to imagine is 1 cubic foot, so 12 inches by 12 inches by 12 inches. There would only be 10 particles or molecules in that space. That's pretty amazing because each one of us generates 200,000 of those per second by breathing in large part and shedding and whatnot. So keeping it that clean requires a very special facility, and this one is. It will also allow us to do both research for things like the next generation chips as well as biotechnology, nanomedicine. It's very unusual for a facility to be able to do that. So this is a very special facility. People from all over the world will come to use it. It is a facility that will be used by any university in the university system in Georgia, but also universities in the country will come and pay a fee to use it as well. Multi-user configuration. Funding, we're very grateful. The governor stepped forward, the regent stepped forward, you stepped forward to provide $45 million in support for that. Georgia Tech raised $45 million to match that, and we're putting $50 million worth of equipment. The Georgia Research Alliance will help us with some of the equipment, and I know you're interested in GRA and its actions as well. These kind of investments lead to increases in research expenditures. As you can see on this particular slide, we've had a steady increase in research expenditures at Georgia Tech, now approaching $450 million. We are managing 2,300 awards in order to generate that kind of research expenditure, with hundreds and hundreds of graduate students employed and undergraduate students employed to carry out that research. And that research, incidentally, is very, very competitive. It's not something that we get easily. Over a quarter of our research expenditures, incidentally, are with industry. The average for the research universities in the country is 7%, 25% at Georgia Tech. We're typically 1, 2, or 3 in the country, tied with MIT, for amount of industry sponsorship. A big chunk comes from the federal government as well. Very competitive. Next slide. What are we doing in terms of research? Well, it's cutting-edge type of research. We have 18 national centers of excellence. For example, in the energy area, we have the National Center of Excellence in Solar Power from the Department of Energy. I'll talk a little bit about nanomedicine and some of the more exciting new developments shortly. And over to the right, as a matter of fact, you can see one of the comments there. We're number 3 nationally in nanotechnology papers that are cited by peers. That just came out last week after a survey that was done. We have a lot of work going on in nanotechnology. We're now number 3 in the world in citations about nanotechnology. Lots of activities. Jeff Skolnick in systems biology, I mentioned that because we had to build a special computer for this gentleman. The 41st most powerful in the world is now housed near Georgia Tech. We did not have a building that would accommodate it, so we rent space for it. But that's systems biology. That's something we do in concert with the University of Georgia, Georgia State, and Emory and Medical College. They have very strong bio components to their research. One of the things we can do to help them is to do the deep dive high performance computing in support of that. If you're going to use nanotechnology to actually solve problems for an individual, customize the type of treatment you get so you don't get side effects, you're going to need to be able to deep dive into your molecular map and understand. That's what systems biology is, and we are doing that. It was supportive of our sister institutions. Next slide. Our work in the medical area is expanding significantly. Recently, the NIH, National Institutes of Health, competed 3 new nanotechnology sensors in nanomedicine. Georgia Tech and Emory won in all 3 of those competitions. We also, in the last of those that we competed for, DNA and RNA repair, Medical College of Georgia was a partner with us. We're very proud of the partnerships that we've created to attack this remarkable new area called nanomedicine. What nanomedicine is, if you identify a location in your body where you have a cancer cell, and we can actually locate cancer cells with nanoparticles. will attach to the cancer cell because it has a receptor for that particle. It will identify to the doctor where that cell is. The next step is the next nanoparticle will go in and find that same location and enter into the cancer cell inside of it and release Taxol or another attack mechanism and kill it, rather than having you take it and pervasively invade your entire body and give you side effects. This is personalized and predictive medicine, and Georgia Tech, Emory Medical College of Georgia are on the cusp of this whole area. We're very excited about that. In addition, we're working with the Shepherd Spinal Center and with Children's Hospital on a number of other medical initiatives. Atlanta, Georgia should become a destination for health care in the country. And part of that will be what we can bring to the table, like systems biology, information technology, nanomedicine, and that complements what the University of Georgia Medical College, Emory, and Medical College will be doing. Next slide. Just a quick run through on some of our other thrusts. I'll mention one in particular in energy, our new research thrust. We have a big thrust in energy. I mentioned our solar work, but we've also started working seriously on ethanol. And it turns out that a resource here in Georgia is a tremendous source of ethanol, and it's an underutilized resource, and that would be pine trees. Pine trees, of course, aren't being harvested today. They used to be used for pulp and paper, but folks are going overseas for pulp and paper. You may know the Paper Institute was merged into Georgia Tech, so we're very active in work in this area. But pine trees can produce ethanol much more efficiently than corn. Corn is actually a very inefficient way to get ethanol. Pine trees are a very efficient way to get it. And we have had folks working on it. We have pilot plants up and running. We believe we could supply 20% of the gasoline needed for this state from pine trees in this state. And it's close by a resource, and it's in communities that need the economic boost. The governor's excited about it. We're excited about it, as is DOE, and we're off and running on that. Other things I mentioned already. Next slide. Some of the other places where we're working in high-performance computing, robotics, disaster recovery. We're still very active with the Katrina situation. I chair a panel on Katrina recovery. We were just doing that yesterday. Global safe water. We're interested in developing countries and connections between Georgia and developing countries. Safe water is a major issue for these countries. Sanitation and safe water is a huge issue with mortality in these countries. Down on the left-hand side, we have a group of folks working on solar latrine. Doesn't sound very progressive, but it's a very interesting technology. If you can treat the waste, they don't get into the water supply. And so the three individuals you see there worked on that, the faculty member and two students worked on that project. It was a United Nations project, and we're actually building these things now in Bolivia, and they're being used in local communities. The gentleman to the left, who's on the low side of the hill in that picture, you noticed is the largest of the three people working on this project. And I would simply mention that you've probably heard of his name before. His name is Calvin Johnson. Calvin, of course, is otherwise known as an All-American and unfortunately left Georgia Tech early, although he's completing his work this term, and he'll come back and finish his degree. But it's wonderful to have a football player like Calvin who's interested in humanitarian efforts. All right, now all of this leads up to economic impact. Universities should have an economic impact. And we just completed a study this past year with a firm looking to quantify our economic impact as accurately as we could. And I won't go through the details of that. It was an excellent study. Georgia Tech's annual economic impact is judged to be $4 billion a year to this state. And it's a huge impact, of course. Other ways to look at that, in 2005, we were awarded 43 patents. That's in the top 10 for universities in the country. If we look at Georgia, the largest groups for patents are from GE Energy and Bell South. The third largest patent producer is Georgia Tech. So we're proud of the fact that we're producing intellectual property that will generate new companies. And speaking of new companies, through our incubator, the ATDC Development Incubator that run for the state, we've been spinning off more and more companies. And you can see a little bit of that progression up there over these last few years. 2000 to 2005, 47 new companies have been produced and spun out of the incubator. And the incubators right now are full. So there are more companies yet to come. In the far left-hand side of this slide is something called Technology Enterprise Park. This is a park we're developing with private funds, not having to rely on state funds, that we are bringing in. When a company leaves the incubator, we want them to stay here in Georgia. We don't want them to go to Research Triangle. We don't want them to go to California. We need to keep them here. And so the Technology Enterprise Park is an effort to do that. And you have wisely, working with the governor, allocated a fund to help offset some of the initial costs for these companies. And that fund can be used to bring companies into a place like this, to give them a little break on the rent or a little break on the equipment that they need to stay. And so that's an important effort. Next slide. It's always nice when somebody else recognizes you're doing well. Milken Institute, which is a big think tank out in California, did a study looking at the leaders in biotech transfer. And we were very pleased that when they came out with their study, this is a worldwide study, incidentally. Georgia Tech was seen as number 4 in startup companies. Now, I want to give due credit to the Georgia Research Alliance and our fellow sister research universities, because some of that is a wrap-up of what's coming out of all the universities there. But it's a very powerful statement. Number 4 in the world in startup companies in biotechnology. Number 8 in patents filed. Number 11 in technology transfer. Next slide. And speaking of a worldwide reach, we know that Georgia is very strong in its economic development around the world. 70% of the trade coming into our port comes from Asia, as you probably well know. And the governor, of course, has funding in his new budget to expand the reach of Georgia's efforts internationally. We have been working closely with the Department of Economic Development in locations where we have academic and research activities. We've been in France, Georgia Tech Lorraine, for 15 years. French companies have been over any number of times working with the governor and the Department of Economic Development through that connection. We opened an office last year in Ireland, in Athlone, Ireland, at the request of the Irish government to participate with them in translating their research into commercial ventures. And we're working with industry in Ireland, which is mainly a U.S. company, and with their research universities to do that. We're excited about it. The gentleman in the suit looking down at the plaque on the right-hand side, the brown coat, is Brian Cowan. He's the Minister of Finance for Ireland. A very, very bright gentleman. The far left is the mayor of Athlone. The president of Ireland will be here in April, and we're working with the state to make sure her visit is as productive as possible for possible economic impact. We've been in Singapore for about 10 years. We're in negotiations with the Singaporean government to substantially expand our efforts there. Again, we've held receptions and joint meetings with industry, with the Department of Economic Development. We also have a location in Shanghai, and we're working with the Department of Economic Development there. Next slide. GRA. GRA is an important support mechanism for every bit of research we do at Georgia Tech. We're very, very pleased about the support that we've received through the Georgia Research Alliance. And as you know, you don't get research from them unless you're working with other universities. We do work with all of our sister institutions in the Research Alliance, as well as with universities like Mercer, where we find the right target opportunity to work with them. I mentioned some of these efforts already. These are exciting areas, and I know Mike Cassidy will speak to you on that later on. Next slide. Mr. Chairman, you were kind enough in your instructions to allow us to say something about national recognition. And I pulled together this list for me to just put these things together. Academic rankings are fairly commonly reported. You're, I think, well aware Georgia Tech, according to the U.S. News and World Report, for the 8th year in a row was listed as one of the top 10 public universities in the country. We're very proud of that. Our engineering school is typically ranked in the top 5 in the country. We're very proud of that. They do something, though, that no other engineering school or college can match. We have a number of programs in engineering. We're a very broad-based engineering program. Chemical engineering, biological engineering, biomedical engineering, electrical engineering, civil, and so forth. U.S. News and World Report ranks those individually, and every one of those programs is ranked in the top 10 of their respective disciplines. No other university can make that claim. I'm very proud of my colleagues in engineering. Not MIT, nobody else. Even those that are ranked in the top 5 with us. We're very, very proud of that. We're number 3 in the country for public universities and percentage of national merit scholars. We have very, very bright students at Tech, and we're proud of that. I've already talked about the nanomedicine type of recognition for Georgia Tech. And Kiplinger's, an outfit that ranks people on basis of value, that is quality of education versus cost of education, gives us number 12 in the country out of 300 as the best value in higher education. The University of Georgia shares a similar high ranking in that area, and we're proud of that. There's a few others on the right-hand side. Our ATDC is consistently ranked as the best business incubator in the country by the Department of Commerce and others. We're proud of the work they do. Science Magazine recently conducted the ranking as the best places to work. And we're very proud to say Georgia Tech was ranked number 12 out of hundreds of universities as the best place to work. We work, as I mentioned, we work hard to keep our folks happy, to train them, to provide them with opportunities. We're proud of that. Our alumni support Georgia Tech. We're always in the top 5 or so in alumni giving. I mentioned our co-op program. And our campus recreation center, which we just finished, was just voted the best rec center in the country. And the last slide, it's always nice when somebody else notices, as I said. This gentleman you've heard a lot about, Tom Friedman. Tom Friedman, of course, wrote the book, The World is Flat. He came to Georgia Tech after he published the first edition, and as I was talking to him, said I was going to write a second edition, and I'm looking for places where somebody's doing something about the problems identified in edition 1. And we had a wonderful discussion with him. He talked to our faculty and our students, and some of the very things I've told you, we told him. And he was impressed with what he saw. He then indeed wrote his second edition, and I would urge you, if you're looking for that book and you're looking at a bookstore, make sure you get the second edition. It has the same title. But the difference is, for the same price, you get 123 more pages in the second edition. And you go to chapter 7 in this particular book, and it's called The Right Stuff, and Richard walked in just at the right time as one of our alums. The Right Stuff is Georgia Tech, according to Tom Friedman. So we're very pleased that he recognized us and recognized the work we're doing to try to produce and graduate the kind of engineer, the kind of scientist, the kind of architect who can really compete in this flat world. And that's what we're all about. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity to speak with you. Be glad to answer questions if I
We're going to have several questions, but before we get into Chairman Lewis's questions, Chairman Lewis had a study committee on emerging technology this year. And we had one over in Athens and exposed some of the great work in nanotechnology that's going on in Athens. And I hope that we'll have, if anybody needs to leave, I don't know what your timeline is.
No, I'm fine.
This discussion could go on a long time, but there's a lot of excitement in what happened in this study committee, and I hope that Chairman Lewis has already got his light on to ask some questions about it. And that was the one I was calling while ago on the phone to tell him to get here, because this is crucial that you and he have a dialogue.
Great. I look forward
Chairman
to it.
Lewis.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. Dr. Powell, thank you for being here. And let me congratulate you and commend you for a wonderful presentation and for leading a fine institution. And again, this past summer, I want to thank you and your staff, Andrew and Betsy, for the very fine accommodations we had at your facilities there. It was a wonderful program that day, and I learned more than I ever thought I would about some stuff. It was amazing. You mentioned energy, which happens to be a particular passion of mine. I have the privilege of chairing the Energy Committee here. And I have two questions, but the one is relating to energy and the other one to nanotechnology later. But on energy, I think you'll have a nuclear reactor there.
Used to.
Used to.
Yeah.
Is there any plans to reactivate that, or? Okay.
Probably not to build the reactor itself, because that reactor was built in the 60s and it was obsolete fundamentally, and there was no sense in keeping it. And the fact of the matter is the students would learn more by going to some Duke Power or Georgia Power plants to learn how those things operate. We still have, in spite of what happened to that facility, a very strong nuclear engineering program, and we're very proud we kept it. It's still a very vigorous program. One of the reasons it stayed as strong as it did, we have strong relationships with the military, and of course ships are driven by nuclear power plants. So there's still a real demand for nuclear engineers. And in addition, keeping up the older one. But clearly, a recipe for the future for this country, if you're talking about clean energy and you're talking about base supply of energy, nuclear energy is going to make a big comeback.
Absolutely. I'm glad to hear you mention that program there, and also want to congratulate you on mentioning ethanol earlier, pine trees to ethanol, something I've been trying to work on as well. And at some point where it's a more appropriate setting, I'd like to have a good dialogue with you and some of your people there, not only using pine trees for ethanol, but for biomass for electrical generation as well. I think there's wonderful opportunities there. Moving to the nanotechnology, I think I heard you mention something about the number of patents you may have regarding that technology, and all the things that technology can be used for, medicine being probably one of the primary things.
Yes.
We had a discussion earlier regarding some licensing and patent issues with the University of Georgia.
Yes.
And I want to ask a similar question regarding that same topic. Once if you in fact do issue licensings for private companies to start producing based on your research and your invention there, if you will, do you anticipate or do you have any offers to do any licensing to foreign countries with such a cutting-edge new technology? Or will your plans be to try and keep that in Georgia so that Georgia can have the cutting edge on delivering that to the marketplace and have a competitive edge against some of our competitors globally?
That's a very good question. Let's start with the biggest research sponsor we have is the federal government. And the federal government, of course, recognized the value of commercialization of intellectual property for a long time, but they didn't have any mechanism to do it. The federal government itself did not. And so they created Birch Bayh and Bob Dole passed the act, the Bayh-Dole Act, which is a very profound act. And what it said was, for small business or universities, if you were funded by federal government to do research and there was an intellectual property, you could own it, but you couldn't own it free and clear. There were some obligations that came with that. Number one, your job was to try to commercialize it. Universities don't build things. In other words, if we invent a chip, we're not going to manufacture the chip. And so what we want to do is to get that intellectual property out, licensed to somebody like Motorola or someone, to build it, and then the revenues come back to us, and then there are rules about how those revenues can be used. But they have to support future research. But first and foremost, you have to license it to a U.S.-based company, and it has to be approved by the federal government. And so we would not be licensing that to a foreign company because of the federal rules on that, and we follow those rules very carefully. When you do research with the industry, it gets a little interesting because if you talk about IBM, well, IBM is a U.S.-based company, yes, but they have operations all over the world. And, of course, when you work with those folks, there's always a challenge about how to define the intellectual property rules. And we've tried to work out as flexible approach as we can because we don't want to impede the use of intellectual property. Our goal is to get it out the door. That's why we have so many startup companies, and we've worked hard to unclutter the process of creating intellectual property and getting it licensed. But we're always very aware. There are also other rules from the government that relate to deemed exports. And we have to be very careful about deemed exports. And that would apply to software, for example. And there are countries listed on a deemed export list to which we cannot. And deemed exports mean things that are highly transportable, like software or just ideas or how things work. And we have a whole staff that deals with that. When our faculty travel, before they leave the campus, they've got to talk about these rules and regulations before we go. These overseas campuses, we have to be very careful on those campuses about deemed exports. And so we watch that very, very closely. And the government has a set of guidelines for those kinds of issues.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Representative Floyd.
We appreciate what you've done in the
Thank you.
Research on energy and all, and as we are seeing the ethanol plant come on in South Georgia, Mitchell County, how far are we out as far as the biomass, pine trees and all, how far out are we? I know y'all have done a lot of research on that.
Those are fairly short-term possibilities, and the President's going to speak tonight, and you will see in his State of the Union address a significant discussion of ethanol and biomass as fuels. When you look at the energy issue and the energy challenges that we have, the fact we are far too reliant on international oil and so forth, you ask yourself the question, what can be done in the short term? Now, nuclear is an example of something that has to be brought online, but it'll take 15 years before we can build the first nuclear plant, honestly, after you go through the licensing. And it will take probably longer than that before energy companies are willing to invest because of high capital cost in that technology in a significant way. That's the slower one. But ethanol and biomass could happen quickly. And there are still some challenges about distribution because you can't mix ethanol and gasoline in the same pipeline and those kinds of issues. That's why the important thing about biomass and ethanol is that it's here in Georgia. We want to use biomass and the ethanol capacity here in Georgia because we can distribute it here in this state. You know, I don't know that Georgia would become a mass exporter of ethanol to California. We could. I don't know about that. But the first market would be here in Georgia. And it would save Georgia a lot of money and be competitive here. So biomass and ethanol can come on quickly. The technology is pretty well known. You're not talking about huge breakthroughs in technology. You still have to deal with the issues about distribution. That's the biggest slowdown.
I have a follow-up question related to that. and I've read a lot about the hydrocar.
Yes.
And how they're able to, a combustible engine running off of plain old simple water. Not to beat y'all up in Mitchell County in South Georgia, but in China they're working diligently on this, and I wanted to see where you are and where America is in this regard, and if there's some. I've asked this before. If there's some incentive that we could give, say $20 million, $30 million from the state budget, if somebody brings the first hydro car to the state of Georgia. Your thoughts?
Well, interesting question, a very, very good question. It's tempting to say yes to something like that, but there are challenges. And I happen to be fortunate to serve on the President's Council of Science and Technology Advisors, and we have had hearings on these very issues. And that's the reason I said I know the President's going to talk about ethanol tonight, because we just gave him a report. In fact, you might want to get that report, those of you interested in ethanol. It's through the Office of Science and Technology and Policy. In fact, Andrew, we could get them copies on that. And it's what we did was look specifically at this very set of issues about how fast you can bring technology to bear on the issues. And ethanol is one of those you can bring to bear. Hydrogen is going to be probably a huge technology, but not near term. There are too many issues associated with it. And one of the gentlemen who spoke to our committee was a very thoughtful person who's in the venture capital business, and he said the government needs to be careful not to get in the position of picking winners and losers. Let the market pick the winners and losers. If you pick hydrogen, and it's a loser in the sense that it's, timing is everything. The problem with hydrogen is a whole new technology. And we're not even sure quite which version of that we should use. And we don't have the distribution system, and there will be waste issues, even with a hydrogen car, that you have to solve. We don't have the automobiles. To require the country to shift over to a hydrogen car is a huge endeavor. On the other hand, in fact, in 2 or 3 years, every automobile produced in this country as well as internationally will be ethanol capable. And so it's easy to think of ethanol moving into the mainstream quickly. Hydrogen, on the other hand, will take a long time. And we don't have, the hydrogen gas stations, if you will, because you are going to have to tank up on this fuel. So the distribution system's not here, the technology's not here, and people would have to buy automobiles that will probably cost more than their present automobile. So in the long term, sure, hydrogen cars probably will be the way the world works. Now, having said that, at Georgia Tech, we're working on hydrogen fuel cells in a big way, combining it with nanotechnology. And I don't know if you saw it in the paper, but our first practical product was an airplane, which has a 22-foot wingspan. It did fly, and we have flown an airplane for 5 minutes on a hydrogen fuel cell concept. And our goal is in the next 5 years to have a drone that will fly from Atlanta to London with hydrogen fuel cells only. But it's still not a practical technology yet. And so that's the issue.
5 years?
5 years to fly a drone. We believe that hydrogen fuel cells will be the way you want to fly drone airplanes in the future as opposed to what they do today. But getting people into a plane that's driven by hydrogen fuel cells will be a much longer proposition.
I've got 10,000 questions, but Representative Yates.
Why do you keep hearing reports that production of ethanol requires more energy than it produces? Is that because of the high price of petrol going for corn?
Partly, yes. And corn, basically what you're trying to get out of this process is sugar. Sugar is what produces the ethanol. One of the very, very best sources of ethanol is sugar cane. And I grew up as a boy in South Georgia, and I remember we used to grow sugar cane. I don't know why we don't go back to growing sugar cane. That's even better than pine trees. And that's why Brazil is talking about being 100% independent of foreign oil and operating almost all of their automobiles on ethanol because they have a big supply of sugar cane. Pine trees have a lot of sugar in them. Corn has low sugar. And what you end up doing is you have to put so much energy into corn that it's argued, you can take different figures, that you put more cost of energy into producing a gallon of ethanol than you get energy out of it. And so there are actually two reasons why corn is not a good product in the long term. One is cost, effectiveness. And the second one is we need corn to eat. And, if you start chewing it all up in energy, and there's so many other ways out in those states, miscanthus and switchgrass, that you can grow products that will be much better and more energy efficient. Now, University of Georgia is also working on this problem, because take pine trees or take any of these products you can grow, you can genetically change those products to produce more energy. And so University of Georgia has a key role to play, for example, in genetically modifying energy crops. And that's what we're working with UGA on.
I want to follow up with that, and we're going to go back down the path here. This is a lot of questions. When I was growing up, as most of us were, especially in North Georgia, everything that was flat was planted in something, and to the point that we had erosions and the like. And then the farming sort of went out of vogue and because of labor costs, et cetera, et cetera. And then we had the pine tree farms where you got paid a certain amount to are we going to see a complete reversal of this? Because I heard you just say pine trees is very efficient. Then I heard you just say sugarcane is very efficient.
It is.
So are we going to clear cut the pine trees, open the farmland back up and go to sugarcane? I'm serious.
That's an interesting question. I don't know what the dynamics would be, Mr. Chairman, of that. Right now, pine trees are there. You know, we planted those pine trees for pulp and paper. The pulp and paper manufacturers have now gone to Indonesia and Brazil and other places to get their pulp and paper. Those pine trees are just sitting there waiting to be harvested. And we have the harvesting equipment for those trees. And it's just sitting there fallow. And these are in sections of our state that are much in need of economic development and economic resources. So pine trees are an easily accessible resource. I think people will consider replanting sugarcane. If this is a source of ethanol, because sugarcane is the most efficient source of ethanol of all the crops we've mentioned. It's 8 times more efficient than corn.
Representative Chokers.
Mr. President, I've got 2 questions. One is, has there been any thought about using kudzu? Because we have an unwanted large production of kudzu down in Sumter County. But the second question...
Probably somebody at University of Georgia working on that.
I hope so.
And we did have a student, incidentally, who came in. He was a very, very bright young man who had invented a genetic way to kill kudzu.
Are you serious?
I'm serious, yeah. And it, unfortunately, as many great inventions happen to have a side effect, it also, that same product killed peach trees.
We don't want to do that.
So we couldn't use it. But it was an interesting idea.
And as a follow-up question, how's my good friend and former classmate Chan Gailey doing?
Chan is staying. That's the good news. We're glad to have him stay. Chan's a great man, and we're glad to have him there. Appreciate that. I didn't know he was a classmate. I'll pass that on.
Chairman Lewis.
This talk made me think of another question I'd like to ask on alternative fuels. Coal to liquid for gasoline, for transportation fuel. Would you elaborate, if anything, that you're aware of going on with that at your campus, and then further how the economies of scale, if you will, may compare to ethanol, which may be the more economically competitive product between the two, and are they both good for the short term, or one more so than the other?
Well, coal, obviously, we've got lots of coal in this country, and some of it we don't use because it has high sulfur content. And so if you could somehow figure out a way to use that through gasification, that would be a valuable way to do it. I think the challenge for us will be energy demand is going to exceed anything we can do. We're going to need multiple solutions. Right. So biomass is going to be important, ethanol is going to be important, coal gasification. And also, on the other side, the efficiency side. So we have folks working on gasification. We also have folks working on new forms of combustion. And it was in the paper not long ago. Ben Zinn in our combustion laboratory has invented a new way to combust using a flame that actually is not within the combustion area. And it turns out that it produces very little pollutants when you do that. We think, and he was actually working on that for airplane engine. We think that will have application even to productions for Georgia Power in the long run. So more efficient burning and less pollutant burning will be a huge thing. In addition, on the demand side, if we can cut down demand, would be 22% of the energy in this country is used in that thing right there, lighting. And we know if we use solid state lighting everywhere, you'd cut that down to 2%. So getting more and more individuals, more and more companies, more and more governments to use efficient lighting will save an enormous amount of demand for energy. And to its credit, Walmart, it being one, and a number of companies now, have said they're going to convert all their stores to solid state lighting. and they are on their way. They're working on. In fact, we had a meeting of all the Walmart executives from all over the world at Georgia Tech last October, looking at new technologies to reduce demand for them.
In your opinion, would you see would coal and ethanol be competing with one another for market share, or could they complement one another, or is it worthwhile to concentrate on one or the other for the state of Georgia?
I think you have to look at both. I would say from the nation's point of view. I think from Georgia's point of view, ethanol is more pertinent. We don't produce a lot of coal here, but ethanol is a potentially big product, and there really are kind of two different markets. I mean, coal is your base; it's not going to be used in automobiles typically, whereas ethanol will drive you got two big segments for energy. One is transportation, and that's basically gasoline. But that's where ethanol has a big play. On the other side, it's going to be nuclear, coal, as well as another great resource is going to be solar. I mentioned we have a solar center. Cost for solar is steadily going down, and our folks estimate by 2012 you will have competitive cost for solar power out of the present photovoltaic technology. We could have a breakthrough through nano use in photovoltaics that would drive that cost down. Now, if you get it efficient enough, even in a state like Georgia, because you can see we don't have a lot of sunlight today, you could use solar power in a significant way. So solar is sort of the whole card. It's there. It's there to be used if we can just get the technology there.
President, we're belaboring this, but I hope y'all hang with me on one other thing relating to communication. Are you working in video communication, or because we're going to be looking at a very, very strong bill this year relating to video television, video cabling, and where the Bell companies are wanting to get in a big way in them. Yes. Television cable. Tell us a little bit of what you're doing at Georgia Tech, and what do you see going forward in video conferencing, video communication?
Yes. Okay. The key there, of course, is a company. This is a convergence issue, as you know, where these things are converging, and so the cable companies, the telephone companies, telecommunications are all competing for this market, and the equipment companies are competing for this market. One of the base technologies to support that will be having big pipes to transmit that kind of information, because you can't transmit it over regular, straightforward fiber. Now, one of the things we try to do in concert with the University System of Georgia and Georgia Research Alliance, and we were successful in doing with a lot of people's help, is remember 5 or 6 years ago there was a lot of dark fiber out there that was not being used. It was just cheap. And we went together with 20 universities around the country and bought it. And we had financial support from GRA. And our purpose in doing it was we happened to have the technology and the base to work with these other universities. But what we were simply doing was serving the University System of Georgia's interest. And so when we brought that to Atlanta, it's called the National Lambda Rail. And it's up and operating. And it allows us, for example, to do high-performance computing at a distance that we couldn't do before. It also allows us to bring images over at high clarity. At a kind of clarity like HDTV that we couldn't do before, and with no latency in it, where you see somebody going, and then the words come out, those kind of things. So that pipe is it's in place, and we now serve all the 35 institutions of higher education here in the state of Georgia. What that means, for example, for higher education, now this doesn't apply all to the commercial sector, they have their own capabilities, is we can start to think about video conferencing in a whole different way. And there are two competing technologies now on the market, and I've been to the companies and I've seen both these in operation. One is a Halo technology from Hewlett-Packard, and the other is a similar technology done by Cisco. And you may have wondered, why did Cisco buy Scientific Atlanta? They bought Scientific Atlanta because of the very issue you're talking about, because Scientific Atlanta is in the set-top box business, providing high-quality images right into the home. So what you're trying to do, though, on our end of it is could we use the Halo technology in a classroom? In other words, could a faculty member at University of Georgia who's a very, very good faculty member deliver a lecture on comparative literature or something, and could that be picked up in other classrooms around the state, and where you would literally, instead of seeing a little TV monitor, that whole wall would be the classroom they would see. Now, if you go to Cisco or HP into their executive conference facilities, these are $500,000 operations to build, because you have to build the whole room, and they each hold 8 people. It's an executive system, not a classroom. And so you sit around in a sort of a semicircle, and that semicircle is replicated at another site. and they have 8 people there. And it's like you're sitting, it's like I'm talking, if I'm 500 miles away, we see each other just as well as we were sitting this close, but we're 500 miles away. But the problem is it only serves at max 16 people, 8 at each site. What we're trying to do, and we've worked with HP, Georgia Tech out, to develop this for classroom technology. And we hope through the Georgia Tech Regional Engineering Program down in Savannah Statesboro to implement it first there. And the chancellor's aware of this. I need to get him over for demonstration. He's planning to come. But there's a huge breakthrough coming in this kind of technology, but it requires the big pipe, first of all. But fortunately, that's in the ground here in Georgia. And then it requires some expenditure. We're trying to work. We don't want to spend $500,000 on a classroom. We're trying to work on a technology that's more off the shelf, that will work in a typical classroom with 40 people in it. So
follow up on that. We heard the chancellor say yesterday, $3 billion of new capital projects are needed over the next 10 years.
Yep.
Is this? I'm sitting here thinking of dollar bills when you're talking about these 6 and 8 people in a circle.
Yeah, we don't want to do that. We're going to set it up for a classroom of 40, and it will be far, far cheaper than that.
So where I'm heading with this is if we need $3 billion of classrooms over the next 10, or construction projects over the next 10 years, is this a way that we can eliminate some of that by perhaps having a Kmart or Walmart that may be closed down somewhere, use that as a facility to beam this in?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Usually the way these technologies work is they are complements to the existing educational infrastructure. The problem we're going to have in the university system is you're going to have maybe 30 or 40,000 more students here in 10 years. And so you just got a problem with size, number of people. And you can't imagine using a distance learning technology where you have 500 students sitting in this classroom and 500. The faculty member can't handle that many students. And so you have to have, but you can use it to help offset some of these issues. And you can use it to improve the quality. First step should be to improve quality and access. And so those kind of things. But reducing cost is a tougher kind of nut to crack. And these technologies do require technicians to take care of them. But we, again, hope that we can make the technologies cheap enough that they would not cost an arm or leg to do it. But that $3 billion in investment, hopefully, will begin to consider having these kind of facilities in there. In addition to classrooms, what we will be using this technology for is for continuing education, lifelong learning. As you know, everybody these days needs lots more training and updating. And if you're in Camilla, Georgia, and you need to learn the latest new thing about Microsoft's new product, instead of coming and staying in Atlanta, we might be able to deliver that to that classroom in Camilla, and that they get almost the same experience down there as they would up here. And so it can improve access and improve delivery enormously.
But speaking of Camilla, before we go to him, this is the last question. I wanted to touch on study abroad. Both of my sons have done study abroad, and it's the most incredible experience. They come back with a huge broader horizon in their brain, and I encourage you to continue to push that. Representative Royal.
Dr. Clough, getting back to the ethanol, you said that we would have the technology quickly on biomass. Are we talking about 12 months, 2 years?
Maybe a little longer than that. The question, Richard, the real problem is distribution. You can go out and you can build a pilot plant and you can get something up and running. You could do that in a year's time. But the problem is doing it in volume and then distributing it. You're a distributor. The issue is how do you get it to the customer so they can use it? We can produce it, and you can build plants fairly quickly, but how do you get it from the plant to the consumer? And so there's more of a distribution problem. And right now, in the case of ethanol, not every automobile is ethanol capable.
Right.
But they are rapidly becoming so.
You're familiar with a Mitchell County plant that's under construction right now. It's a 100 million gallon plant.
Yep.
There are probably a couple of hundred people who have bet $170 million that the corn-based ethanol plant's going to work. Mm-hmm. I went to Southern Legislative Conference, and the agricultural minister for the state of Minnesota, they have 16 plants there, said the last 2 plants that came online paid for themselves the first year.
Yep.
And, Fagan, who builds all these plants, is going to build the one in Mitchell County. And, they've done some great research on it and says, it's feasible.
Mm-hmm. It is feasible. And ethanol from pine trees is certainly feasible as well. It's just a question of getting the resources to get these plants built and get them going, and then get them into automobiles that can use them.
Yes, sir.
And corn is, as we discussed earlier, I don't know if you were here, is not the most effective crop. In fact, it's one of the least effective crops because you put a lot of energy in it to get the ethanol out of it. Pine trees, you could get more energy for energy input than you can from corn. And sugar cane is even more efficient. So, but corn is a resource, again, but we don't, I think ultimately, if people really dive into use of ethanol, you're going to immediately run into the problem of this stuff is our food, too.
Well, there's one thing that you've got to agree, though, that you, even in Georgia or in the Midwest, if you put corn at $3 to $4 a bushel, they'll cover you up with corn.
Yep, that's true.
We have a great potential out there to
But
grow another crop.
I agree, but we need to proceed all of the energy-based foods that we can.
Right.
Chairman Lewis has got one last simple question.
It was great. It helped me think of wanted to ask another question. Taking up from Representative Royal, this technology that turns corn into ethanol, can it be interchangeably used to turn pine trees into ethanol, or is that two completely different technologies for those processes?
Remember, I'm a civil engineer, so I'm getting a little out of my depth here. The basic process, I understand, is similar. You're just trying to get sugar out of the product to turn it into ethanol, and ethanol is a sugar derivative. So, but the processing of the product, like you start out with pine trees, you got to clean them up just like you would for pulp and paper. You got to get all the bark off and get all the limbs off and all that. You don't. And with corn, it's a different process, I guess, to prepare it. So I'm not the right one to answer that question.
But there, if I heard you right, that possibility may exist.
Absolutely.
To do that.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. I'm through. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, the good news on pine trees, incidentally, that process of producing the ethanol-based pine tree is the same as you do for pulp and paper. But we shouldn't think that you're going to go out in the street and pick up limbs and that'll produce ethanol. It's got to be a pretty clean product when you get to it.
President Clough, we've run way past your time, and I think everybody's been very, very appreciative of it.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
I've had two people already say we'd like to have you back for 30 minutes, if you would, before the session's over, to discuss the other issues.
And I have people who are far more knowledgeable about energy than myself. I'd love to have them participate in the discussion.
But thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Thank you for what you do for Georgia.
Thank you. Pleasure.
At the next meeting, we're trying to wrap a lot of these up real quickly. Tomorrow at 1:30, I believe it is, in room, probably the same room. Thank you very much.